We open on a young man caught in the heart of a wild animal stampede. He lets out a silent scream, completely overwhelmed by the thundering chaos. Suddenly, his eyes snap open, revealing the nightmare was nothing but a dream. He wakes up in a hollow classroom, realizing he's slept through every single lesson. A quick glance at the clock confirms the worst. It's already late afternoon. The school day is long over, leaving the hallways eerily quiet and deserted. On his walk home, he can't help but smile at the memory of his animal-filled dream. But he quickly kills the thought, knowing animals would never actually like him. Right on cue, he spots a group of stray cats huddled together beneath a tree. Instantly, his self-doubt vanishes, replaced by a surge of pure, unfiltered joy. Unfortunately, that joy is met with nothing but pure, unadulterated feline terror. The cats scatter in a heartbeat, leaving him reaching out for nothing but thin air. He forces a weak smile, desperately trying to convince himself that he doesn't care. It's a painful, recurring pattern that has haunted him for his entire life. A flashback reveals that even the gentlest creatures flee the moment he draws near. Apparently, even the king of the jungle wants absolutely nothing to do with him. He trudges on, wondering if he's cursed to be feared by the very things he loves. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the pouring rain, calling out his name, Arihara. He turns to find a girl from his class, partially hidden behind a bright umbrella. It's Shishihara, and she seems completely absorbed in a strange, ancient-looking book. She notes that even now, the local animals still seem to despise him. Arihara is stunned that she's even aware of his bizarre affliction. Her expression quickly softens into one of deep regret over a shared moment from their past. However, our protagonist is drawing a complete blank regarding what she's talking about. A flashback reveals that, as a child, she had cruelly mocked him for his curse. Returning to the present, she offers him a sudden and sincere apology. He tries to play it cool, admitting that the incident had completely slipped his mind. With the tension finally broken, Arihara smoothly pivots the conversation to her book. She immediately lights up, passionately explaining her love for fantasy and mythical lore. Right there in the middle of the rain, the two find some unexpected common ground. She hesitates for a brief second, a flicker of uncertainty dancing in her eyes. Then she brightens up again, suggesting they continue their chat another time. But their casual moment is violently cut short by a blinding flash of light. An intricate magic circle suddenly materializes directly beneath Shishihara's feet. Arihara realizes he's caught in the radius, watching helplessly as she's pulled away by an unseen force. Disorientation takes over as his world dissolves into a chaotic blur of light and panic. An invisible barrier erupts from the seal, throwing him backward with brutal, concussive force. She screams his name, reaching out her hand in one final, desperate plea. The ground beneath him vanishes, and his day is about to get a whole lot weirder. Now in total free fall, he has no idea what just happened or where he's heading. His descent ends as abruptly as it began, leaving his eyes wide with pure shock. Looking up, he's greeted not by the open sky, but by a decaying, crumbling stone ceiling. Dazed and disoriented, he struggles to process the reality of his sudden arrival. He finds himself perched atop a stone altar deep within an ancient, forgotten chamber. A single question pierces the heavy silence: where in the world has he been sent? His first instinct is to call out for Shishihara, her name echoing through the hollow room. Panic begins to surge as he frantically scans the area for any sign of his companion. But the chamber remains cold and empty. She is nowhere to be found. The grim reality sets in. The magic circle must have transported him here completely alone. Desperate for a lifeline, he reaches for his phone, clinging to a final shred of hope. However, his only connection to the modern world lies in his hand, completely shattered. Left with no other options, he begins a frantic search through the ruins for any possible exit. But his path is quickly cut short by a dead end, blocked by tons of fallen debris. He notices a small opening near the ceiling, but it's far too high for him to ever reach. Driven by desperation, he scours every corner of the chamber for another way out. That's when he realizes he might not be as alone as he initially thought. His heart skips a beat as his mind reels from a truly gruesome discovery. He scrambles backward in terror, coming face to face with a long-dead resident. A horrifying realization strikes him. Is this skeleton a glimpse of his own inevitable future? But before he can spiral into despair, a strange, sudden noise catches his attention. The source of the noise is a tiny black cat, staring back at him with hauntingly wide eyes. Arihara spots the feline perched atop the ruins, completely blindsided by its presence in such a place. Its gaze is piercing, yet its expression remains eerily vacant and unblinking. A cold sweat breaks out as he questions if this creature is even a normal cat at all. Suddenly, the unstable pile of debris shifts, sending a massive slab crashing down. But rather than fleeing, the cat lunges forward, launching itself directly at him. It sinks its teeth into his arm with a vicious bite, refusing to let go. He's stunned. It seems his curse of repelling animals has evolved into attracting violent ones instead. The cat emits a blood-curdling hiss, its face contorting into a demonic snarl. Arihara immediately begins pleading for his life, frantically claiming he's actually a massive cat person. But the assault abruptly stops, replaced by the soft, gentle press of a paw against his cheek. Arihara is paralyzed in disbelief, feeling the velvet pads of its paw against his skin. He realizes with dawning horror that it actually feels surprisingly pleasant. The cat just stares, its empty expression revealing absolutely nothing about its intent. It then settles onto his chest and asks a simple, yet world-shattering question. Arihara's mind goes completely blank, his brain failing to process the words he just heard. The creature seems genuinely surprised to find him here, sensing a mysterious power surging within him. As he panics over the talking feline, it calmly informs him that it isn't a cat at all. With a single, effortless leap, it reaches a high ledge, leaving him sprawled on the floor in shock. Right before his eyes, the cat's body begins to bubble and shift into a new form. The bubbling mass solidifies into a massive owl, introducing itself as a shapeshifter. It shifts into a rabbit, making it clear that it's far from a normal animal. Next, it becomes a corgi, explaining it belongs to a species with extraordinary abilities. Finally, it reverts to its cat form, admitting that this is simply its favorite look. Arihara's brain short-circuits. This is way beyond anything his fantasy books prepared him for. Ignoring his panic, the creature demands to know his identity and how he arrived. Yet it seems to grasp the situation before he can even utter a word. The shapeshifter deduces that he was caught in an otherworld summoning ritual. Completely lost in the fantasy jargon, our protagonist can only repeat the words in a daze. It explains that during this ritual, a hero is summoned from another world to save this realm. Arihara's mind reels as he tries to process the impossible reality of an isekai scenario. He points to himself, skeptically wondering if he's supposed to be the legendary hero. To him, the very idea of being a savior feels utterly ridiculous. The shapeshifter bluntly clarifies, Shishihara was the hero, Arihara was just accidental baggage. However, it senses a hidden depth within him, a unique power waiting to be unleashed. With that, the mysterious creature extends an unexpected proposition. It asks if he wants to form an alliance to escape these treacherous ruins together. Arihara hesitates, suspicious of why such a creature would ever want to help him. The shapeshifter warns that these ruins are crawling with bloodthirsty monsters. Even worse, the only exit is guarded by the most powerful and terrifying beast of them all. Arihara naively wonders if they can simply talk things out with the final boss. The shapeshifter clarifies that unlike itself, most monsters aren't exactly conversationalists. It then reveals that it's been waiting for a specific human to step up and become its master. That master, it explains, must be a tamer, someone with the innate power to command monsters. Naturally, the term is completely alien to our protagonist. He interrogates the creature, demanding to know how it could possibly know about such a hidden power. His only frame of reference is a character class from an old video game, making him a self-proclaimed expert. The shapeshifter explains that Arihara's unique aura can actually grant special abilities to monsters. Specifically, he has the ability to charm them, an ironic twist for a boy animals usually run from in terror. The creature asks if any of this is finally starting to click for him. It connects the dots, suggesting his lifelong curse of repelling animals was just a side effect of his talent. Arihara is left completely reeling by this world-shattering revelation. The shapeshifter explains his power is so overwhelming that animals instinctively flee to survive. The truth hits him like a freight train. His greatest burden was actually his true nature all along. And that's exactly why the creature is so desperate for Arihara to take command as its master. He slowly begins to wrap his head around this bizarre but undeniable logic. Piecing it all together, he realizes they must combine their strengths to take down the final boss. The shapeshifter seems genuinely impressed that he's catching on to the plan so quickly. But before signing his life away, Arihara has one final question for his potential partner. He asks why the shapeshifter is so hellbent on escaping these ruins in the first place. The shapeshifter casts its gaze downward, unveiling a deeply personal motivation. It reveals that long ago, it shared a genuine bond with a human companion. For a fleeting moment, the memory softens its usually hollow, vacant expression. This friend was the one who taught it language, magic, and the complexities of the world. Now it yearns to experience the horizon again, but this time by its master's side. Its eyes flicker with a raw longing, practically begging for a shared journey. Arihara is left speechless, caught off guard by the creature's vulnerable confession. However, his shock soon transforms into a sense of quiet, unwavering resolve. He agrees to the deal, ignoring the cat's warnings that this could all be an elaborate trap. But Arihara just smiles, deciding to fully trust a talking cat he met 5 minutes ago. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Pleased with his blind faith, the shapeshifter prepares to finalize their arrangement. It tells him to hold out his hand, explaining that a drop of blood is required to seal the pact. With a single sharp claw, it gently pricks the tip of his finger. The creature places a paw over his hand, instructing him to channel all his energy into the point of contact. But Arihara is instantly derailed by the glorious, squishy sensation of the cat's paw pads. He quickly snaps out of it, shaking his head to focus on the ritual at hand. As the creature chants the incantation, the tether between man and monster begins to tighten. An ancient contract, forged in blood, starts to manifest between the two of them. A radiant glow envelops the pair as the magical pact is officially etched into reality. Arihara watches in silence, his face a chaotic mix of awe and sheer disbelief. The shapeshifter announces the contract is sealed, and Arihara asks if it's officially his familiar now. To demonstrate their new connection, the creature tells him to shut his eyes and focus. Arihara complies, feeling a surge of nervous anticipation for what's about to happen. Amidst the darkness, a faint, cat-like silhouette begins to glow with an ethereal light. The creature asks if he can feel its presence now that their minds are directly linked. His eyes snap open in amazement as he realizes he can truly sense the creature's soul. The shapeshifter then realizes they haven't even exchanged proper names yet. It introduces itself as Sif, a name given to it by a long-lost human friend. Arihara offers a warm smile and introduces himself as Kaido Arihara. He extends his hand, and Sif accepts, officially acknowledging Kaido as its new master. With the pleasantries finished, Kaido turns his attention to their most pressing problem. He asks how they're supposed to escape a room buried under a mountain of heavy rubble. Sif hops onto his shoulder, explaining that it specializes in 3 types of support magic. Suddenly, a powerful, shimmering aura begins to emanate from the tiny cat. Kaido is stunned as that very same energy instantly envelops his entire body. Sif reveals its third ability, a potent body reinforcement enchantment. Kaido clenches his fist, feeling an incredible surge of strength unlike anything he's ever known. His eyes widen in disbelief. This isn't a dream. This is real, tangible magic. Sif explains that this effect is far more potent than anything it could achieve on its own. It seems Kaido's unique power acts as a massive amplifier for his familiar, turning him into a walking power-up. Sif explains that with this newfound strength, leaping over the massive pile of rubble should be a breeze. Kaido stares at his fist in awe, his senses completely overwhelmed by the surging energy. For the first time, he feels truly invincible, ready to crush anything this cruel world throws his way. However, Sif's expression instantly contorts into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. Because before she can even blink, Kaido launches himself forward like a human cannonball. He doesn't just leap over the barrier, he obliterates it, plowing straight through with a single punch. The massive barricade shatters into a million fragments from the sheer, raw force of the impact. Just like that, the path forward is cleared. Hey, if it works, it works. Kaido gazes at his hand, his mind reeling as he tries to process the destruction he just caused. He marvels at the supposed power of support magic, still oblivious to the fact that this strength is his own. Sif stands there frozen, realizing that whatever this is, it's far beyond the scope of a normal tamer. Kaido then remembers an old game where tamers fought on the front lines alongside their beasts. A wild, game-inspired strategy begins to take shape in his mind. He proudly declares his new class, a brawling tamer ready to punch his way to the top. Sif, on the other hand, looks significantly less impressed by his ridiculous new self-appointed title. Regardless, Kaido is filled with a surge of hope, feeling truly energized by their partnership. While Shishihara's safety still weighs on him, he knows escaping these ruins is the immediate priority. As they venture deeper into the darkness, a massive, slumbering silhouette blocks their path. The beast stirs and awakens, revealing itself to be a terrifying, multi-headed dragon. Sif calmly explains that their summoning was likely triggered by the resurrection of a demon lord. The grim reality finally sets in. Kaido was summoned for the sole purpose of slaying a demon lord. However, Sif interjects, explaining that Kaido's innate magical reserves are actually staggering. Seeing his confusion, Sif clarifies that it all comes down to that body reinforcement spell from earlier. The spell's potency was amplified to an absolutely astronomical degree. Sif reveals that Kaido's power acts as a massive multiplier, scaling his magic exponentially. He's essentially a walking cheat code. Sif then pivots, asking if Kaido has any actual experience in martial arts. He recalls his childhood karate lessons and the hours spent watching pro wrestling with his father. As Sif processes this, a bewildered Kaido asks how the creature could have possibly known. Sif explains that his earlier punch wasn't just raw power, it displayed the precision of a genuine martial artist. Armed with this realization, Sif declares that a crucial theory has finally been confirmed. Sif drops a bombshell. Kaido is far more lethal fighting on his own than any monster he could ever command. Kaido is completely stunned, questioning what that even implies for someone with the tamer class. Sif can only reiterate that he is definitely not your average tamer. The creature then hops onto a nearby pillar, eager to proceed to their next objective. Sif outlines the plan. They need to find and select another monster for Kaido to tame. Kaido's mind immediately races with dreams of a massive monster army, forgetting for a moment that he's the primary brawler. But Sif quickly kills that dream, explaining that as a novice tamer, he's limited to just one more familiar. The choice needs to be tactical. Sif wants a monster that perfectly complements its own support magic. It begins weighing their options, searching for the ideal partner to bolster Kaido's frontline combat style. However, their strategic planning is interrupted by a piercing, high-pitched shriek echoing from the shadows. The source of the commotion finally reveals itself, a swarm of tiny, bouncing slimes. However, one poor creature is being relentlessly bullied by the rest of the pack. Sif identifies the creatures with calm precision, catching Kaido completely off guard. But the shapeshifter spots something peculiar about the one being singled out. It's a mithril slime, a term that means absolutely nothing to the confused Kaido. Sif explains that it's a rare variant, born only after absorbing a specific type of magical ore. This process makes the creature slow and heavy, an easy target even for the weakest predators. A calculating look crosses Sif's face as a brilliant plan begins to take shape. She suggests Kaido tame the bullied slime, because every legendary hero needs a mascot, right? Beyond aesthetics, Sif notes it's a perfect defensive shield and a strategic asset for future battles. She reminds him of the body reinforcement spell, the true source of his newfound strength. Kaido stands ready, with Sif perched on his shoulder like a tiny, furry general. Sif assures him that with his current power level, these slimes don't stand a chance. All he needs to do is scare them away, and while Kaido agrees, he still looks incredibly nervous. With a sudden burst of speed, he launches himself directly into the heart of the swarm. He winds up his fist, channeling all that amplified magic into a single, concentrated point. But instead of a gentle warning, he strikes the ground with absolutely devastating force. The resulting shockwave sends the entire swarm of bullies hurtling into the darkness. When the dust finally settles, only the small, trembling mithril slime remains. Sif is once again stunned by his master's overwhelming power, so much for just scaring them off. Hearing a faint, inquisitive cry, Kaido turns around to investigate. The mithril slime gazes up at him, its eyes still shimmering with remnants of fear. He kneels down, softly checking to see if the little creature is unharmed. The slime responds with a series of joyful bounces, its terror instantly vanishing. Sif observes that the little guy has clearly taken a shine to its savior. Kaido then makes a formal offer, asking the creature to become his newest familiar. Sif announces that it's time to initiate another blood-bound ritual. He places his hand upon the slime, commencing the ancient contract. With the pact sealed, Sif declares the slime as his official second familiar. Kaido cradles his new companion, who responds by affectionately nuzzling his cheek. Kaido notices how incredibly light the creature is, while Sif explains that familiars love being named. He pauses for a moment, searching for the perfect title for his tiny new friend. He settles on Lime, a simple yet fitting name for the miniature slime. The newly dubbed Lime chirps happily, clearly thrilled with its new identity. With his team growing, Kaido looks to Sif and asks about their next objective. Sif begins outlining their strategy, focusing on teaching Kaido to harness his latent power. But suddenly, panic grips Sif's expression as a tear wells up in its eye. An earth-shattering roar suddenly tears through the absolute silence of the ruins. Sif screams for Kaido to take cover as an unseen threat rapidly closes in. Kaido dives behind a wall, his heart racing as he wonders what monster could produce such a sound. Sif explains that this is the most malevolent and powerful entity within these ruins. The source of the roar finally emerges, a monstrous, three-headed serpent known as Orochi. Kaido watches from the shadows of a pillar, completely paralyzed by sheer terror. His mind reels as he struggles to grasp the gargantuan scale of the beast looming before him. Trembling, he turns to his companions and desperately asks what kind of monster they're facing. The mere sight of the abomination is enough to drain every last drop of color from his face. Sif lays out the grim reality. There is no retreat, only the path leading straight through the beast. She reveals that Orochi was once a direct servant of the Demon Lord, just another casual Tuesday, right? But Sif reminds him he isn't alone. With their powers combined, they might actually stand a chance. Kaido's only response is a blunt, honest confession of his overwhelming fear. His mind fractures as he screams that fighting such a creature is an impossible task. He slumps against the stone pillar, his spirit crushed by the weight of his own dread. However, Sif assures him that there is no shame in feeling fear in the face of death. She explains that true strength is born from the will to survive, even when you're terrified. Kaido realizes that without Sif's guidance, he would have perished alone in that very first room. Suddenly, Lime leaps from his shoulder with a small but fiercely determined cry. The tiny slime begins to transform, hardening into a shimmering mithril shield upon his arm. A fresh surge of resolve fills his heart. He refuses to die here, and he won't let his friends fall either. Above all else, he must find Shishihara and ensure she's safe from harm. With his mind finally steeled, he rises to his feet, ready to challenge the impossible. Sif checks his resolve, and Kaido confirms that his fear has finally vanished. Bolstered by newfound courage, he lunges forward, prepared to follow Sif's every lead. Sif activates a body reinforcement spell, surging raw power directly into his master. Kaido vaults past the massive serpent, aiming to puncture its exposed flank. However, as he closes in, he notices the Orochi is already mangled and bleeding out. He touches down on the far side, his expression twisted in utter confusion. He realizes the beast hasn't budged an inch since they first arrived on the scene. The gruesome truth dawns on him. It was too busy gorging itself on other monsters. Sif shrieks a warning, telling him to watch his footing amidst the carnage. Kaido sprints through the gore, while the Orochi remains distracted by its bloody feast. Suddenly, the Orochi's eye snaps open, its predatory gaze locking onto the intruder. Its massive tail whips around in a lethal arc, targeting Kaido with crushing force. Sif bellows a desperate command, urging him to jump for his life. Kaido hurls himself into the air just as the ground beneath him is pulverized. He sticks the landing, but Sif immediately alerts him to a second strike from the left. He leaps again, only to find himself staring directly into the monster's gaping maw. Terror washes over him as he realizes he's made a fatal miscalculation. But in that split second, Lime lets out a defiant cry and springs into action. The small slime launches from Kaido's arm, stretching out like a living tether. It snags a high pillar, yanking its master away from the serpent's snapping jaws. Lime's clutch save yanks Kaido skyward, his face a frantic blur of shock and relief. He narrowly swings past the Orochi's snapping jaws, barely avoiding becoming a mid-air appetizer. Kaido sticks the landing, losing a shoe but keeping his life as the beast glares from the darkness. Sif praises Lime for the heroic save, and the little slime puffs up with pride on Kaido's shoulder. The weight of his brush with death finally hits home, leaving his face a mask of pure disbelief. Adrenaline gives way to a violent tremor as absolute terror takes hold of his body. His legs buckle beneath him, paralyzed by a fear so intense he can barely stand. But Sif refuses to let him buckle, reminding Kaido that he's not in this fight alone. Lime adds a courageous squeak, signaling its readiness to protect its master at any cost. Reinvigorated by his companions, Kaido forces himself back up, ready for round two. He grits his teeth, his wavering resolve hardening into a razor-sharp focus. Sif screams at him to keep moving, demanding that he never stop running for a second. Kaido lets out a defiant roar and sprints down the corridor with everything he's got. The Orochi retaliates instantly, spewing a torrent of black, corrosive venom. The lethal spray misses by an inch, splashing violently against the cold stone floor. The ground sizzles and melts the moment the vile liquid makes contact. Ziff panics, shrieking that the poison almost tarnished its precious, pristine fur. Kaido realizes that escaping isn't enough. The beast will just hunt him down until he's dead. Blinded by fury, the Orochi begins to thrash wildly, pulverizing the ancient pillars. Ziff notes that the creature has lost all reason, now chasing them in a mindless, feral rage. A desperate, wild idea suddenly pierces through Kaido's rising panic. He bellows a new strategy: turn the pillars into weapons with Lime's assistance. Lime eagerly complies, elongating its body into a sturdy, massive pole. Gripping the improvised mithril staff, Kaido's expression hardens with grim resolve. Ziff commands him to hold steady before unleashing a powerful flame enchantment. The staff erupts in flames, and Kaido swings the blazing weapon with everything he's got. The ignited staff now doubles as a torch, illuminating the dark path ahead. Ziff offers some classic fantasy advice: abandon common sense and just go berserk. With a defiant roar, Kaido confirms he's prepared for the chaos to follow. Letting out a final war cry, he slams the flaming staff into a massive pillar. Using the staff as a lever, he pours every ounce of his magically enhanced strength into the blow. The strain is catastrophic, causing the muscles in his arm to tear under the immense pressure. A scream of pure, unadulterated agony escapes him as his body begins to fail. Yet even as the white-hot pain threatens to break him, he grits his teeth. He refuses to yield, knowing that a single moment of weakness means certain death. His reckless plan finally comes to light. He's not just breaking a pillar, he's bringing the entire ceiling down. With one final, desperate roar, he pushes far beyond his body's absolute limits. The sheer force causes his frame to buckle, blood splattering, as his vessels burst from the exertion. His eyes go wide, reflecting a chaotic mixture of shock, agony, and raw determination. Ziff screams in encouragement as the ancient ceiling finally begins to crumble. Ziff points the way, screaming that the exit is finally within reach. But Kaido's body is failing him. He can barely feel his limbs as his muscles scream in agony. His vision begins to blur, and his consciousness wavers on the brink of collapse. Despite the pain, he surges forward, charging through the chaos toward the light. But the Orochi isn't finished. Its massive head lunges from the shadows for one final strike. Letting out a defiant roar, Kaido swings his makeshift weapon with every ounce of his remaining strength. He shatters the final supporting pillar, triggering a massive, total cave-in. The force of the collapse sends him flying, his plan working a little too well. His energy finally bottoms out, and his reinforcement magic vanishes in an instant. As he begins to plummet, Lime leaps into action with a desperate cry. The small slime stretches its body, transforming into a living grappling hook. It snags Kaido just in time, yanking him away from the crumbling ruins. The Orochi bellows one last agonized roar as it's buried alive. Tons of rock and debris rain down, crushing the colossal serpent beneath the weight. The demon lord's servant is utterly obliterated by the falling mountain. Its reign of terror in these forgotten ruins has finally come to an end. The beast is now entombed within the very ruins it was sworn to protect. Kaido is hurled from the tunnel, crashing hard into the dirt outside. Staggering to his feet, he surveys the wreckage, noting that so much for finding a front door. Looking up at the open sky, the reality finally sets in. He's actually free. Kaido is completely spent, his body paralyzed by sheer exhaustion. Ziff and Lime rush to his side, overcome with relief to find their master still breathing. Strangely, Kaido realizes the pain is dull. He's simply pushed far past his physical limits. His familiars panic, desperately vowing they won't let their new master perish in this wasteland. Suddenly, Ziff senses tingle as she detects human presences approaching in the distance. As Kaido's consciousness begins to fade, his final thought drifts toward Shishihara. He can only pray that wherever she ended up, she's managed to stay out of harm's way. Ziff and Lime sprint toward the newcomers, frantically guiding the group back to their fallen master. They encounter a band of adventurers who are reeling from the sight of the collapsing ruins. Connecting the dots, the party realizes this kid somehow survived a legendary monster's lair. His mind finally fractures, his last coherent thoughts dissolving into a frantic blur. The sheer weight of his fatigue drags him down into a deep, dreamless slumber. He lies motionless on the earth, a faint smile tracing his lips as he finally finds peace. As the adventurers carry him to safety, his name echoes from the cries of his tiny companions. While Kaido rests, the perspective shifts to the girl who started it all, Shishihara. She finds herself in a majestic throne room, the absolute center of everyone's attention. Dazed and disoriented, she struggles to piece together exactly what just happened to her. She scans the room of mysterious robed figures, realizing she had a much luckier landing than Kaido. Her gaze eventually settles on the man atop the throne, who appears to be addressing her. The king introduces himself, declaring that she has been summoned as the world's chosen hero. Shishihara desperately repeats that she's from Tokyo, Japan, hoping someone recognizes it. However, the king looks on with a blank stare, having absolutely no idea what she's talking about. His advisor steps forward, confirming that no such land exists within their known world. As the court murmurs in confusion, it becomes clear that her home is a total mystery to them. But then, a look of profound, shocking realization washes over the king's face. He solemnly declares that she must be an inhabitant from an entirely different world. The throne room erupts into pure pandemonium at this impossible revelation. Hanging his head, the king admits their ritual failed, resulting in this accidental summoning. Shishihara's mind begins to reel as she struggles to process this nightmare as reality. She forces herself to take a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. Meanwhile, the court descends into panic, wondering how they'll ever face the demon lord now. Shishihara cuts through the noise with one desperate question: can she go home? With a heavy heart, the king admits they have no way of sending her back to her world. He can only offer a sincere, deep apology for their catastrophic, life-altering mistake. As the grim reality sinks in, Shishihara's last shred of hope begins to crumble. But then a sudden, horrifying realization pierces through her despair. She frantically asks the guards if they've seen the boy who was standing right next to her. She gives them the name Arihara Kato, but the name draws nothing but blank stares. She explains that he was caught in the summoning circle alongside her during the ritual. The king is completely blindsided. They didn't just summon the wrong hero, they brought a +1. Shishihara's mind spirals as she struggles to wrap her head around the impossible truth. The king erupts into a panic, instantly commanding a massive search party to find Arihara Kaido. Amidst the chaos of the scrambling court, Shishihara remains on her knees, consumed by overwhelming regret. Clenching her hands tight, she offers a desperate prayer that Kaido is still out there, clinging to life. Meanwhile, our protagonist's eyes slowly flutter open to the sensation of his entire body throbbing in pain. Waking up in an unfamiliar bed, he gazes around, wondering just where he's ended up this time. His two familiars immediately pounce on him, their joy radiating as they realize he's finally conscious. Kaido manages a feeble wave, relieved to see that both Sif and Lime are safe and sound. The horrific image of the Orochi flashes through his mind, confirming it wasn't a nightmare. Talk about a rude awakening. Sif explains that his body had reached its absolute limit. He would have been dead meat if not for their rescuers. The crushing weight of his brush with death finally sinks in, leaving him shaken. Just as he asks who came to his aid, a young adventurer bursts through the door. She looks visibly relieved, noting that he's looking way better than when she first found him. Sif chimes in, confirming that this girl is indeed the savior who pulled them from the brink. Flashing a bright smile, she introduces herself as a local adventurer named Lyra. Kaido bows his head in gratitude, formally thanking Lyra for saving his life. His two familiars follow his lead, offering their own silent gestures of appreciation. Lyra casually brushes off the thanks, far more interested in how his recovery is coming along. Realizing the pain has vanished, he learns a healer used magic on him. Apparently, this world has health insurance, it just involves more chanting. Stunned by the reality of healing magic, Kaido asks the million-dollar question: where exactly are they? Lyra beams as she explains that they're currently in the Hendel Kingdom. Gesturing toward the window, she points out that they're in the local Adventurers Guild clinic. Kaido can only echo the word guild, his mind struggling to process this strange new reality. Sensing his confusion, Sif intervenes, spinning a lie about Kaido being from a remote backwater village. Sif telepathically warns him to keep his otherworlder status and stats a closely guarded secret. Lyra swallows the story hook, line, and sinker, her face glowing with newfound excitement. She reveals she's a country girl herself and eagerly offers to be his personal guide. When the topic shifts to age, Kaido mentions that he's only 17 years old. Lyra proudly declares she's 18, claiming seniority and acting like she's a seasoned veteran by comparison. However, her bubbly mood is instantly shattered by a sudden, panicked gasp. Remembering an urgent guild quest, she frantically apologizes for having to cut their meeting short. With a final wave, she encourages Kaido to drop by the guild once he's back on his feet. In the blink of an eye, she's gone, leaving Kaido alone in the sudden silence of the infirmary. He stares at the door, still dazed by the absolute whirlwind of energy that just blew through. Heeding her advice, he decides to prioritize his recovery and put his anxieties on the back burner. Fast forward a few days, and Kaido finally steps outside, ready to see what this world has to offer. He finds himself in a thriving metropolis, surrounded by sights he's only ever seen in fantasy novels. The streets are packed with a diverse crowd, ranging from spellcasting witches to rugged beastmen. Reality finally hits him. He's definitely in an isekai, and his school uniform makes him stick out like a sore thumb. He spots a massive queue for a well, realizing that modern plumbing is officially a thing of the past. Sif explains that these strange contraptions are magic tools, a common sight in this world. Kaido is stunned, realizing this world possesses its own unique form of technology. His familiar reassures him that he'll grow accustomed to these new sights in no time. With a clear goal in mind, he heads straight for the Adventurers Guild to track down Lyra. He pushes open the heavy doors, bracing himself for whatever awaits him inside. Kaido is instantly overwhelmed by the sheer, boisterous energy of the hall. The guild is a chaotic melting pot of battle-hardened warriors, mages, and sellswords. Several adventurers are unwinding with a drink after a grueling day of questing. Others crowd the counter, either turning in completed tasks or hunting for their next paycheck. On the wall, a massive board is plastered with requests for monster slaying and escorts, essentially a fantasy help-wanted section. Kaito scans the room, noting the intimidating aura radiating from every adventurer present. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls his name, and he spots Lyra waving from across the hall. She greets him with a warm welcome, clearly relieved to see him back on his feet. Flashing a bright smile, she asks for his first impressions of the place. She explains the guild's purpose, a central hub where requests are gathered and assigned to adventurers. When Kaido asks if all these intimidating people are adventurers, Lyra proudly confirms that she's one of them. He's stunned, realizing the cheerful girl who saved him is actually a seasoned warrior. However, she quickly deflects the praise, amazed that he managed to escape the Orochi's ruins alive. Sif telepathically warns him to stick to their cover story about getting lost, because apparently, getting lost now includes burying a demigod's pet snake under a mountain. Lyra's excitement only grows as she notices his rare familiars, declaring him a truly fascinating tamer. Lyra casually floats the idea of Kaido becoming an adventurer himself. Sif immediately pounces on the suggestion, asking what it takes to join their ranks. Lyra breaks down the rules: be over 15, have the skills, and pass an assessment, basically a fantasy job interview with more swords. Sif is fully on board, noting that they desperately need a steady source of income to survive. She also views the guild as the perfect environment to train and scout for potential allies. Kaido silently weighs the proposal, realizing his options in this new world are dangerously thin. Right then, two more adventurers approach the group, recognizing Kaido immediately. They introduce themselves as Fran and Gil, the remaining members of Lyra's squad. Kaido bows low, offering a formal word of thanks to the entire group for saving his life. Fran admits the party was genuinely stunned by the dire state he was in when they found him. She mentions how shocking it was to find a tattered boy near the Orochi's collapsing lair. Gil then turns to Kaido, bluntly demanding to know if he's the one who leveled the ruins. However, he quickly clarifies that there's no need to apologize for wrecking the place. In his eyes, the site was nothing more than a dangerous monster nest with zero real-world value. Kaido realizes the intimidating warrior isn't actually angry, he's just a man of very few words. Suddenly, a woman in formal guild attire approaches their table with a polite request. She asks Kaido to confirm his identity using his full, otherworldly name. She then drops a hefty bag of coins on the table as a relief fund, essentially hazard pay for stumbling into a boss fight. Kaido is utterly floored, questioning why on earth he's being handed a small fortune. The woman explains it's compensation for his misfortune of getting lost in a guild-managed zone. Kaido tries to decline, insisting he was merely an unlucky bystander caught in the crossfire. However, Sif chimes in telepathically, urging him to just take the gold and run. He offers a deep bow, accepting the funds while vowing to settle the debt one day. Though deep down, he hasn't the slightest clue how he'll actually manage that. The staffer mentions the guildmaster intended to deliver it personally, but was tied up with business. With a final polite gesture, she departs, leaving Kaido to offer his final thanks. Gil then drops the million-dollar question: is Kaido planning on becoming an adventurer? Kaido can only admit that he hasn't quite figured out his next move yet. Lyra observes him closely, a brief shadow of concern crossing her usually bright eyes. But the mood shifts instantly as she grabs his hand, volunteering to be his personal tour guide. She practically drags him away, bursting with excitement to show him around the city. Fran and Gil wave them off, telling the pair to enjoy their little excursion. Fran notes how energized Lyra seems, happy that she's finally found a friend her own age. Lyra leads the way, weaving through the vibrant and bustling streets of the capital. Along the way, a bubbly beastman girl with rabbit ears hops over to welcome him. Kaido is quickly distracted by a stunning elf woman passing by, so much for his survival instincts. Lyra then points out their true destination, the guild's massive training grounds. They take a seat in the bleachers, overlooking the intense combat practice below. In the arena, a mage unleashes a devastating water spell against a seasoned warrior. Both Kaido and Lyra watch in total awe, stunned by the sheer destructive power on display. Lyra's first order of business is getting Kaido a wardrobe that doesn't scream, "I'm not from around here." They spend the rest of the day exploring the city, bonding over the local street food. As night falls, they make their way back to the inn where Lyra is staying. She bursts through the door with a cheerful shout, announcing their arrival. Their boisterous entrance is met by a woman with a far-from-thrilled expression. Her gaze immediately locks onto Kaido, silently questioning who this new kid is. Kaido politely introduces himself, explaining that he's a recent arrival in the kingdom. The woman introduces herself as Melk, the inn's owner, before eyeing his familiars suspiciously. Sif proudly speaks up, introducing himself as Kaido's legendary shape-shifting familiar. Melk sighs, wondering why her inn only seems to attract tamers with ridiculously rare monsters. Lyra cheerfully begs Melk to let Kaido stay, pointing out all the empty rooms. The innkeeper's gaze remains intense as she silently judges the boy and his companion. Her eyes seem to pierce right through him, seeing far more than just a lost traveler. She finally names her price, 15 days with meals for a mere 3 copper coins. Sif confirms that this price isn't just low, it's practically a total giveaway. With the deal settled, Melk tells him to go ahead and pick any room he likes. She then adds that she'll be heading to the kitchen to prepare his dinner. Lyra explains that Melk has a very unique way of setting prices for her guests. Kaido realizes she must have sensed his misfortune, giving him the ultimate pity discount. By the end of the evening, a stack of empty plates proves he's finally been well fed. Lyra beams, declaring that the innkeeper's cooking is easily the best in the entire kingdom. Kaido takes a moment to offer his heartfelt gratitude for everything she's done for him so far. She waves it off with a smile, admitting she sees a reflection of her younger self in him. She opens up about her past, arriving in the city as a simple country girl with absolutely nothing to her name. Seeing him so helpless brought those memories back, making it impossible for her to just walk away. However, she notes that Kaido looked far more lost and isolated than she ever felt. Her blunt honesty strikes a chord, leaving him momentarily paralyzed and at a loss for words. He offers a silent nod, acknowledging that her observation is painfully accurate. That night, the weight of his dire situation finally begins to settle in as he sits alone in his room. He realizes he's been running from the truth, dreading any thought of what his future in this world might hold. But instead of drowning in despair, he resolves to finally take that crucial first step forward. The following morning, Lyra and Sif find him staring into space at the breakfast table, deep in thought. Suddenly, he breaks the silence with a bold declaration: he's going to become an adventurer. Lyra is stunned, nearly choking on her food at his sudden and unexpected career choice. Kaido explains that idle worrying won't change his fate. It's time to take action and do what he can. Sif chirps in agreement, clearly proud of his master's newfound sense of determination. Lyra's shock quickly shifts to excitement as she promises to escort him to the guild the very next morning. True to her word, they stand before the Adventurers Guild, ready to kickstart his new life. The hall is every bit as chaotic and overwhelming as he remembered from his first visit. Kaido is already trembling with nerves, making Lyra wonder what happened to all that steely resolve from breakfast. Lyra waves a cheerful goodbye as she heads off to find the guild receptionist. Suddenly, Sif's ears twitch, his entire body tensing with a sharp sense of alarm. Kaido spins around, only to find himself face to face with a mysterious hooded figure. The stranger's voice is low but commanding as she asks if he is Arahara Kaido. Kaido's blood runs cold. Someone in this fantasy world actually knows his real name. The hooded girl presses him further, demanding confirmation of the identity she just revealed. Her gaze is piercing, even though her face remains veiled in the shadows of her hood. He stands frozen, his mind racing to comprehend how this could even be possible. Sif sends a frantic mental warning, while Kaido desperately fumbles for a response. With a strained smile, he blurts out a fake name, Jacob Rising, a true master of disguise. The girl repeats the alias slowly, her expression remaining entirely unreadable. Without another word, she turns and disappears into the thick of the crowd. Kaido is left standing there, desperately hoping she simply had the wrong person. However, the weight of that brief encounter leaves him visibly shaken and on edge. He scans the bustling guild hall, but the mysterious woman has vanished without a trace. One question haunts him: how could anyone here possibly know his true identity? A chilling realization sets in. This wasn't a coincidence, she was hunting for him. His mind immediately flashes to the only other person from his world, Shishihara. Sif asks about the stranger's identity, but Kaido is far too lost in his own dread to answer. The familiar praises his quick thinking, noting that the Jacob cover story may have just saved them. Sif telepathically mocks his choice of an alias, but Kaido insists the deception was a necessary evil. Just then, Lyra returns, blissfully unaware of the tense encounter she just interrupted. She guides him toward the counter, where a mysterious crystal orb sits on display. The receptionist explains that this is a specialized tool used to measure one's magical aptitude. Lyra reveals she had it brought out specifically for him as a pre-test before his official assessment. Taking a deep breath, Kaido focuses his energy, channeling his internal mana into the device. The instant his hand makes contact, the crystal erupts in a blinding, brilliant flash of light. The entire guild hall falls silent as every adventurer notices the intense radiance emanating from the counter. Lyra can only stare in awe, mesmerized by the sheer beauty of the golden glow. However, the receptionist is completely baffled. She can't identify this strange golden hue, so much for a simple test. Desperate for answers, the receptionist retrieves a thick, ancient-looking tome from the archives. She frantically flips through the weathered pages, determined to identify this magical anomaly. She admits that Kaido's power doesn't seem to fit into any known magical system. But then her eyes lock onto a single, obscure entry hidden deep within the book. Kaido watches her with bated breath, a bead of sweat rolling down his face. With a stunned expression, the receptionist reveals the name of his power, pure magic. It is a raw, unfiltered energy, so potent that it defies all standard classifications. She points to the orb's distinct golden color, explaining it's the primary indicator of this rare trait. Sif asks if the color alone is what differentiates this type of magic from the rest. The diagram reveals a hierarchy of power with gold sitting at the absolute peak. It turns out our boy didn't just get a cheat code, he got the developer's console. The receptionist reads a grim passage, explaining that in ancient times, those with this power were used as human sacrifices. Sif confirms the text, noting the staggering purity of Kaido's magical signature. Kaido is left speechless, struggling to process that his supposed curse is actually a legendary gift. However, the receptionist warns him that such a rare ability is a double-edged sword. She reveals that ancient monsters who crave the taste of pure magic still roam the world today. The horrifying truth finally clicks for Kaido. This is exactly why the Orochi was so obsessed with him. He realizes that any high-level beast will now hunt him relentlessly. He's essentially a walking, talking monster magnet. The receptionist tries to ease his anxiety, assuring him that such apex predators are incredibly rare. Kaido forces a smile, though the weight of this revelation still looms over him. He asks Sif if his magic acts as a high-octane fuel for his familiars, boosting their innate abilities. Sif confirms this, explaining that Kaido's pure energy is the reason its spells are so devastating. The familiar proudly praises its master, while Lime chirps along in enthusiastic agreement. Kaido's fear begins to fade, replaced by the joy of knowing his power can protect his new friends. He turns back to the receptionist, addressing her by name, Mai. With newfound resolve, he officially declares his intention to take the adventurer's exam. Mai smiles, revealing that Lyra had already filled her in on his ambitious plans. She slides a registration form across the counter, instructing him to fill out the details. He prepares to sign, knowing this is the first real step toward his new life in this world. But his pen suddenly stops short as he hits a rather embarrassing roadblock. He sheepishly admits that he can't actually read or write the local language, so much for a smooth start. Mai stands frozen, blindsided by his incredibly awkward confession. Lyra lets out a nervous laugh, desperate to maintain his remote village cover story. She proposes a simple solution. He can just trace the characters she writes for him. Lyra quickly steps in, filling out a template for him to painstakingly copy. Later that day, they return to the inn with his registration finally secured. Kaido collapses onto his bed, exhausted but relieved to have cleared the first hurdle. He now has exactly 19 days to master the world's language and complex customs. Sif reminds him that while academics are vital, his physical training cannot be ignored. The shapeshifter warns him that its training regimen is notoriously brutal. But Kaido welcomes the challenge, fueled by a desperate need to grow stronger before the exam. And so, Kaido's hellish training begins in the desolate fields outside the city walls. He unleashes a guttural scream, pushing his physical vessel to its absolute limit. Bolstered by Sif's magic, he heaves a massive boulder that would crush any ordinary man. Sif realizes the synergy between their magical energies is terrifyingly potent. However, the backlash is instantaneous, leaving his muscles screaming in agony. Lyra cheerfully offers to fetch a healer for his inevitable total body collapse. The following days blur into a grueling montage of relentless physical conditioning. Sif proves to be a merciless coach, shattering any illusion of being a gentle familiar. Lyra even recruits a friend, a skilled young mage, to assist with his development. But it's not all physical. He's also forced to master the complexities of reading and writing. He endures grueling push-ups with a massive boulder on his back, while Sif acts as a tiny, furry drill sergeant. He even practices his swings with a heavy timber log, preparing himself for any combat scenario. 19 days of hell pass in a flash, and the fateful day of the exam finally arrives. With his familiars perched on his shoulders, Kaido faces the challenge with a new, steely resolve. He joins the other applicants in a massive hall, waiting for the trial to begin. He tries to steady his nerves, knowing he's pushed his body to its absolute limit to prepare. However, his confidence wavers the moment the written portion of the exam is handed out. Squinting at the paper, he barely recognizes the character for 5. At least his literacy crash course is yielding some results. Sif notes the low turnout, but Kaido explains that the exam is actually a monthly occurrence. Their quiet observation is cut short as the heavy doors to the hall suddenly swing open. And right on cue, the mysterious hooded girl from before steps into the room. Sif recognizes her instantly, and Kaido confirms she's the same girl they encountered earlier. She marches directly toward his table, her intentions completely shrouded in mystery. His familiars immediately bristle and go on the defensive, sensing a potential threat. But instead of a confrontation, she timidly asks if she can take a seat next to him. Completely thrown off, Kaido stammers out a nervous invitation, so much for playing it cool. As she sits, the tension in the air becomes thick enough to cut with a knife. The girl seems incredibly flustered, struggling to find the right words to break the ice. Kaido asks if something is wrong, desperately trying to make sense of the awkward situation. She admits she was just surprised by how calm he appeared, leaving Kaido utterly bewildered. She asks if Jacob is also here to take the adventurer's exam. However, her eyes narrow as she questions if that's actually his real name. Kaido's mind short-circuits, realizing his terrible lie has been instantly exposed. He frantically recalls giving her that ridiculous fake alias, Jacob Rising. Even Sif can't help but snicker at his master's pathetic attempt at espionage. Kaido forces a smile to double down on the lie before quickly asking for her name. The girl bows her head politely, apologizing for not introducing herself sooner. She reveals her name is Lifa, showing him her exam card, number 4. Kaido is surprised, asking if she's also striving to become a licensed adventurer. Lifa looks away, admitting she doesn't really want to, but has her reasons. She explains that she's looking for companions, as it's the only way to survive. More specifically, she's searching for someone she can truly put her trust in. His familiars can only watch from the sidelines, baffled by this enigmatic girl. She then asks if he's a tamer, and a nervous Kaido confirms his class. Her demeanor shifts instantly, as she leans in to grill him on his support abilities. Kaido is thrown by her sudden intensity, so much for a quiet, low-profile exam. His mind races, wondering if she might actually have information on Shishihara. But their strange conversation is cut short by a call from the guild staff. Leafa stands up, calling him Jacob and telling him it's time to head out. Kaido follows, realizing he's just been swept along by her mysterious agenda. The applicants are led out of the hall and into a massive, open-air training ground. Waiting for them in the center stands a lone, battle-hardened warrior. His piercing, unforgiving gaze sweeps over the group, mentally dismantling every recruit. He introduces himself as Rick the Proctor, sternly warning them that this exam will be brutal. Whispers break out as they recognize him as Rick Casing, a legendary gold-rank adventurer. Rick makes one thing perfectly clear: he won't be showing an ounce of favoritism to anyone. He explains that trust is the guild's bedrock, and a single failure reflects poorly on the entire organization. Even if royalty stands among them, he'll judge them solely on their performance during the trial. The sheer weight of his presence crushes their spirits, leaving the applicants pale with terror. With the intimidating introduction out of the way, he finally reveals the nature of the test. Rick announces that the exam is a mock battle, where they're expected to fight with everything they've got. The applicants are visibly shaken, realizing that serious injury is now a very real possibility. However, the proctor quickly clarifies that they won't be squaring off against one another. He levels his sword at the group, declaring that he is their opponent, and they'd better come at him with intent to kill. Kaido and Leifa stand frozen, completely blindsided by this seemingly impossible challenge. One overconfident applicant lets out a roar, charging headfirst into the fray. Rick meets the desperate charge with nothing more than a single, effortless flick of his blade. The man is sent flying as his assault is instantly shut down, so much for the brave volunteer. Looking utterly unimpressed, the proctor coldly declares that he's seen enough from that one. The defeated warrior can only tremble on the ground as he's ordered to back down and get out of the way. Another hopeful steps into the arena, ready to test their mettle against the seasoned proctor. From the sidelines, Lyra watches the scene unfold with an expression of pure apprehension. A quick look at the adventure rankings confirms the worst. Rick sits comfortably at the very top. She realizes Kaido's chances of surviving this brutal gauntlet are practically non-existent. With the first challenger easily swept aside, Rick calls for applicant number 4. The mysterious hooded girl, Leifa, steps out from the shadows to take her turn. Kaido keeps a close eye on her, intrigued by the girl who just had her number called. She halts before the proctor, her hands visibly trembling with nerves. But in a heartbeat, she unsheathes 2 curved blades, and her entire presence undergoes a terrifying shift. Even Lyra can feel it, a heavy, overwhelming aura radiating from this enigmatic girl. Kaido watches intently, trying to decipher what kind of lethal fighting style she's hiding. Rick takes his stance, beckoning her to strike whenever she feels ready. Her eyes narrow with lethal intent, as a flicker of cold focus completely erases her timid front. In a blur of motion, she closes the gap, her steel clashing violently against his. She drops low to the ground, maintaining pressure with a relentless, twin-bladed assault. Lyra is left speechless, her eyes struggling to keep up with the girl's explosive speed. Kaido is just as stunned, barely able to track her movements as she dances around the arena. Even the stoic proctor loses his cool, a look of genuine shock flickering across his face. Leifa lets out a fierce battle cry, unleashing a torrential flurry of precision strikes. Moving like a phantom, she leaves afterimages in her wake while overwhelming the gold-rank veteran. But Rick holds his ground, his eyes narrowing in intense concentration. He acknowledges that her speed and precision are flawless. This girl is a genuine prodigy. Kaido watches in awe, realizing she's operating on an entirely different level. Even Lyra is stunned by the sheer ferocity of the hooded girl's relentless assault. Leifa's fighting style is feral, reminiscent of a cornered beast ready to tear its prey apart. She lunges forward once more, becoming a blur of motion against the seasoned warrior. But her twin blades aren't her only trick as she reaches for a hidden weapon. She unleashes a whirlwind spinning attack, moving far too fast for the naked eye to track. Rick parries the blow, but the force of the impact is far greater than he anticipated. For the first time, the gold-rank adventurer's stoic expression shifts to one of pure shock. Lyra watches from the sidelines, her jaw practically hitting the floor. Kaido stands paralyzed beside her, completely overwhelmed by Leifa's raw power. Then, in the blink of an eye, Leifa vanishes from sight entirely. The proctor scans the field, desperately trying to track her impossible speed. She reappears directly behind him, dropping from the sky like a lethal shadow. Before he can react, she unleashes a devastating kick aimed straight for his head. The blow connects, sending the legendary adventurer stumbling forward. He barely manages to block her follow-up strike, now trapped completely on the defensive. She lands hard, but her relentless assault is nowhere near finished. With a fierce battle cry, she prepares to unleash her next devastating technique. She grits her teeth, refusing to yield an inch to the legendary warrior. But Rick simply lowers his blade, calmly announcing that he's seen enough. He acknowledges her skill, but notes that she's blinded by raw, uncontrolled rage. Lifa gasps for air, her relentless assault brought to a grinding halt. The proctor makes it clear, her reckless aggression is a fatal flaw. With a cold dismissal, he turns his back on her to find the next candidate. The hooded girl stands frozen, her entire body trembling in disbelief. Her fierce mask shatters, giving way to a wave of pure, unfiltered frustration. She looks up, eyes wide as the weight of the situation finally sinks in. It's official, the proctor has just failed the most promising applicant. Lifa glances back at Kaido, struggling to process her defeat, but he's just as stunned. Up in the stands, Lyra is baffled, certain a prodigy of that caliber should have cruised through. She recalls the girl's ethereal, shadow-like movements, sensing a power she can't quite identify. With the prodigy out, Rick shifts his focus to the final applicant, number 5. Kaido can only manage a nervous squeak as he realizes it's finally his turn to face the legend. Suddenly, a familiar voice pierces the tension, screaming his name from the crowd. It's Lyra cheering him on with a bright smile and a final burst of encouragement. He gives a weak, shaky wave back, desperate for any support in this terrifying moment. Sif repeats his real name, the one Lyra just broadcasted for everyone to hear. Kaido panics, but Sif tells him to ignore the blown cover and focus, so much for keeping a low profile. The proctor shifts his gaze to Kaido, questioning if he's truly the tamer in question. Rick looks intrigued, beckoning him forward to see which monster he'll be summoning to fight. However, Kaido declares that it's time to unveil the results of his grueling training. He tightens his grip on his wooden practice sword, his expression hardening with newfound resolve. Perched on his shoulder, Sif activates its signature body reinforcement spell. Kaido explodes forward, closing the gap between them in a sheer blur of motion. He puts his weight into a massive swing, fueled by all the amplified strength he can muster. Rick is stunned, wondering why a tamer is choosing to fight personally during a standard exam. He dodges the strike with ease, noting that the boy's strength is being boosted by support magic. But he quickly spots a fatal flaw. Kaido's swing is far too wide and incredibly clumsy. Kaido realizes with dawning horror that raw power is useless without the technique to back it up. He adapts on the fly, commanding Lime to shorten his form into a makeshift club. He strikes again, but Rick effortlessly parries the blow with his armored gauntlet. Kaido lets out a roar of frustration as his desperate attacks are repeatedly neutralized. Surprisingly, the proctor is impressed, finding the boy's raw potential and lack of experience intriguing. Kaido grits his teeth, realizing his unrefined swings will never land a clean hit. In the heat of the moment, a desperate new strategy begins to take shape. He barks out a command, and Lime instantly shifts his form into a razor-sharp spear. With a powerful shout, he hurls the living weapon directly at the proctor's head. Rick sidesteps the projectile with ease, watching as the spear embeds itself into the wall behind him. Rick is genuinely stunned, not by the attack itself, but by the sheer, unbridled power behind it. Kaido refuses to let up, immediately pivoting into a devastating follow-up kick. However, the proctor catches his leg with effortless grace, completely killing his momentum. Rick is actually impressed, conceding that this kid has some serious guts. Kaido can only roar in frustration, finding himself completely at the mercy of the gold-rank adventurer. Rick swings him around like a ragdoll before tossing him aside. Talk about a reality check. Up in the stands, the other applicants watch in awe, stunned by Kaido's relentless tenacity. Even the mysterious Lifa observes the chaos with a quiet, unreadable intensity. As Kaido regroups, he realizes that brute force alone won't be enough to break through. He quickly shifts gears, commanding Lime to manifest a reinforced gauntlet around his fist. But his companion has one more trick prepared, a brand new enchantment for its master. It unleashes a surge of lightning, a high-level spell they've never tested in actual combat. Rick smirks, noting the impressive output, but reminds him that power is useless if it can't land. In response, Kaido's face breaks into a confident grin. He has something else in mind. Suddenly, the proctor's smug expression falters, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. Kaido calls out to Lime, making sure his partner is ready for the upcoming impact. With a final, determined roar, he prepares to gamble everything on one last, desperate move. He throws a full-force punch, not at Rick, but directly into the ground beneath them. The proctor stands frozen, completely baffled by such a reckless and insane tactic. But as the dust rises, his face contorts in shock as he realizes what the kid is actually aiming for. The ground shatters as lightning arcs violently from Kaido's fist. This raw, untamed power triggers a sudden jolt in Rick's memory. It pulls him back to a legendary confrontation from his own past. A brutal struggle against a monstrous serpent that pushed him to the brink. He can still feel the vibration of steel clashing against impenetrable scales. He was forced to retreat, narrowly dodging a series of devastating strikes. Even a legendary adventurer like him didn't escape that fight unscathed. The beast eventually revealed its true form, a terrifying, multi-headed hydra. Rick recalls being completely surrounded and pinned on the defensive. Driven to his absolute limit, he was forced to resort to magic to survive. Back in the present, Kaido's face is frozen in a mask of pure horror. He screams for Lime to stop, his own overwhelming power spiraling out of control. The memory of the Hydra flashes through Rick's mind one final time. He had been forced to unleash a devastating spell just to stay alive. Now Kaido and his familiars collapse, utterly drained and exhausted. Rick just smiles, admitting that Kaido almost made him use magic again. Stunned, Kaido can only mutter the word, oblivious to the disaster he nearly caused. He admits his instincts screamed at him to halt the attack at the last second. He gazes down, struggling to process the failure of his desperate gambit. Despite all that destructive force, the only thing he managed to break was his wooden sword. Rick lowers his weapon, officially declaring the end of their mock battle. He admits that Kaido's final, desperate gambit actually managed to catch him off guard. With a rare, genuine smile, he praises the young summoner for a truly impressive performance. Stunned but elated, Kaido finally feels the weight of his hard work being recognized. Rick dismisses the group, announcing that the first phase of the exam is officially over. The session concludes, leaving the applicants' futures hanging precariously in the balance. The second the pressure lifts, Kaido collapses to the ground, completely drained of energy. Sprawled out in the dirt, he gasps out words of praise for his loyal familiars. Sif is still reeling, shocked that he could improvise such an insane tactic in the heat of battle. Kaido explains he needed a move on par with the Orochi just to survive. Typical protagonist stuff. Sif notes that Lime was actually able to perfectly mimic the Orochi's complex attack patterns. Kaido just offers a weak smile, relieved that his reckless gamble actually paid off. Suddenly, Lifa looms over him, declaring that his trial isn't quite finished yet. Before he can even blink, she tackles him, pinning him firmly to the dirt. He slams into the ground, completely immobilized by the mysterious girl's sudden aggression. She lines in dangerously close, demanding to know his real name, personal space be damned. Her gaze is sharp and intense. She's officially done humoring his blatant lies. Kaido's mind goes blank as his flimsy cover story is torn to shreds in an instant. Even his familiars are paralyzed with shock by this sudden, aggressive interrogation. He tries to deflect, desperately clinging to the false identity he established earlier. She proposes a deal, promising to reveal her own story if he finally starts being honest. Backed into a corner, he finally relents, admitting his true name is Arahara Kaido. A wave of relief washes over Lifa's face as her grueling search finally comes to an end. She releases him, ending the sudden interrogation just as quickly as it had begun. She confirms his identity once more, referring to him as the real Arahara Kaido. Kaido can only echo her strange phrasing, left more bewildered than ever before. The scene shifts to the city market, where Lyra is happily enjoying a well-earned snack. Soon after, the exam results are posted, revealing that only 2 candidates, numbers 4 and 5, have passed. As Kaido celebrates, Lyra reminds him that he earned this win by holding his own against a legend. Sif notes that number 4, the mysterious hooded girl, also managed to survive the brutal test. Lyra approaches him, teasingly asking if he was just being bossed around by that mysterious girl. He can only stammer out a weak denial, completely flustered by the chaotic situation. Yet Lifa's cryptic words continue to haunt him, "So, you really are the true Arahara Kaido." Left sitting on the ground, he wonders what on earth she could have meant by that. She simply walks away, promising to explain the full story when the time is right. Lyra rushes over to check on him, but Kaido is still reeling from the bizarre encounter. Even later that day, he's still fixated on her words, questioning this real version of himself. Lyra tries to boost his spirits, explaining that the first test is always the most difficult hurdle. Giving him a confident thumbs up, she's certain he'll breeze through the final interview. Kaido's face instantly goes blank. It seems his guide forgot to mention a pretty crucial detail. A guild staffer summons the two successful candidates to the waiting room for their final interviews. Kaido immediately panics, confessing to Lifa that he hasn't prepared a single word for this part of the test. Sif chimes in with a vote of confidence, though she adds a very hesitant, probably, at the end. Lime, meanwhile, remains blissfully unaware, offering a cheerful little chirp of support. The weight of the moment finally hits Kaido, leaving his stomach tied in knots. The waiting room door clicks open, signaling the beginning of the final trial. Stepping inside, he finds the mysterious Lifa already waiting for him. She looks up, her gaze as intense and unreadable as ever. Kaido awkwardly tries to address their heated exchange from earlier. However, he's interrupted when Mai enters, calling Arihara Kaido for the first interview. Mai politely informs him that his familiars aren't allowed inside the room. The heavy door to the interview room swings open, sealing his fate. She holds it for him, and Kaido can only manage a stiff, nervous nod. He steps into the room, his voice trembling as he announces his presence. A dignified man sits behind a massive desk, ready to begin the final interrogation. He introduces himself as Belch Ragiazel, the guildmaster of the Hendel Kingdom. Kaido offers a deep, respectful bow, introducing himself by his full, otherworldly name. His mind short-circuits. This is way above his pay grade, so much for a simple HR chat. The guildmaster reveals he's heard rumors of the boy who escaped the Orochi's lair. He offers a warm smile, congratulating Kaido on surviving Rick's brutal examination. Belch gestures for him to sit, and a nervous Kaido quickly obliges. But before the interview begins, the guildmaster has a few burning questions. He probes Kaido's knowledge regarding the legendary hero summoning ritual. Belch explains that a looming demon lord has forced kingdoms to summon heroes for survival. This rings a bell for Kaido, as Sif had mentioned something strikingly similar. The guildmaster reveals that a neighboring kingdom recently summoned a hero from another world. Apparently, that hero claimed another person was accidentally caught in the summoning crossfire. Kaido bolts upright, desperately asking if that hero's name is Shishihara. Belch's gaze remains steady, noting that Kaido's reaction confirms his suspicions. He explains the hero's identity is a state secret, proving Kaido is the real deal. Guess the low profile is gone. Kaido mulls over the words, recalling how Lifa had also called him the genuine article. Belch clarifies that heroes from other worlds possess an overwhelming level of magical talent. As memories of Shishihara flash through his mind, the puzzle pieces finally click into place. The kingdom that summoned her believes that Kaido might possess that same godlike power. Our protagonist can only listen in silence, completely overwhelmed by this political nightmare. To find him, the Filgan kingdom plastered his name and face across every inch of their territory. A massive bounty led to a flood of imposters claiming to be him. He's world famous for all the wrong reasons. The harsh truth finally hits him. This is why Lifa was so desperate to find the real Kaido. Belch asks if he truly hails from a world devoid of magic, and Kaido can only nod. The guildmaster's gaze softens, commending him for surviving this long in such a hostile world. Kaido can only manage a stunned reply, forced to agree with the guildmaster's assessment. He bows his head in gratitude, but despite the thanks, his voice remains heavy with concern. Yet his expression soon brightens, as he realizes he's finally found precious friends in this new land. Birchice smiles warmly, recognizing the incredible resilience hidden within the young man. Meanwhile, back in the waiting room, Sif lets out a loud and rather dramatic sneeze. The shapeshifter and Lime are waiting alongside Lifa, the mysterious girl in the hood. Sif immediately turns defensive, demanding to know what Lifa finds so amusing about her. But Lifa simply looks down, admitting that she was actually feeling envious of their close bond. The two familiars can only stare in silence, completely caught off guard by her sudden confession. Birchai then provides Kaido with a pen and paper, instructing him to write a letter to Shishihara. Kaido hands over the finished note, his personal message to Shishihara, now ready for delivery. The guildmaster examines the bizarre script, immediately recognizing it as a language from another world. Birchai explains the letter will prove his identity, though Kaido worries this will force him to the front lines. But the guildmaster quickly reassures him, stating he is a victim of this world, not its soldier. Those words hang heavy in the air, leaving Kaito to ponder the weight of his new reality. He weighs his options, find Shishihara, then return here to build a peaceful life for himself. Birchai seems relieved, noting that this move should finally end the kingdom-wide manhunt for him. Kaido is stunned to learn the hero's plan to recruit him all along, so much for being just baggage. This revelation leaves him completely speechless, his mind reeling from the unexpected news. The guildmaster offers a reassuring wink, promising that his identity remains a secret within these walls. Still reeling from the revelation, Kaido can barely stammer out a response. He asks the burning question, does the Hendel Kingdom possess its own summoned hero? Belch confirms one was recently selected, but notes that their identity remains a state secret. Kaido processes the news, realizing there are still many mysteries left to uncover in this world. Suddenly, the guildmaster declares the interview finished, leaving Kaido completely perplexed. Belch explains that a person's instincts and reactions speak far louder than any prepared answers. By observing his behavior, the master judged his true character. Essentially, the entire meeting was an elaborate test. With the interrogation over, the heavy office doors click shut behind him. Kaido returns to the lobby, where Sif is waiting anxiously to hear how it went. He shares the good news, the guild is fully informed, and Shishihara is confirmed to be safe. Maya then calls for Lifa Walger, signaling it's finally her turn for the interview. However, Lifa stops Kaido, insisting that they need to speak privately once she's finished. Maya agrees to give them some space, telling them to report back once their discussion is over. Once they're alone, a confused Kaido asks what this is all about. She bows her head, offering a sincere apology for eavesdropping on his entire conversation. Kaido is floored, wondering how she could have possibly heard a thing through those thick walls. She simply explains that her senses are far more acute than those of any ordinary human. Sif immediately bristles, demanding to know the girl's true identity. Lifa slowly reaches for her hood, ready to reveal her connection to the Hendel Kingdom. She discards the cloak to reveal a pair of fox ears, introducing herself as the kingdom's chosen hero. Kaido can only mutter her last name, Walger, in sheer disbelief. Both he and Sif are stunned. This young girl is the kingdom's legendary hero. Kaido's mind races, trying to reconcile the fact that she's clearly a beastman. Sif senses it too, noting her aura is a bizarre fusion of human and monster. Leifa explains she was born with a primal, monstrous power dwelling inside her soul. Kaido asks if her parents were monsters, but she confirms they were both ordinary humans. She believes her condition is a genetic throwback from a distant, monstrous ancestor. Sif identifies it as atavism, a rare phenomenon where she's essentially won a cursed genetic lottery. Kaido finally cuts to the chase. Why was she so desperate to find him specifically? Leifa admits that tracking him down was a long shot she never actually expected to work. Kaido then asks the obvious, why would a celebrated hero need to play adventurer? Leifa explains that she's still green and needs genuine combat experience to grow. He realizes this is why her true identity was hidden, even from the guildmaster. She confesses that in the heat of battle, the monster within takes control, fueling a blind rage. Kaido finally understands why her fighting style was so savage and erratic during the exam. However, she reveals that whenever he's nearby, that chaotic power suddenly settles. His very presence soothes her inner beast, allowing her to finally feel like herself again. Kaido wonders if this is a side effect of his pure magic, making him a literal human tranquilizer. She's convinced that with him by her side, she can finally master her instincts and do her duty. With a look of pure desperation, she begs Kaido to help her. Kaido is left completely speechless, his mind racing to process her sudden request. But Sif immediately intervenes, telling the young hero to wait just a moment. It confirms her suspicions. Kaido's magic might soothe her, but that's no reason to risk his life. Lifa's confident facade finally shatters, her raw desperation visible for all to see. Sif reminds him of his true objective. Doesn't he still need to find Shishihara? Sif presses the issue, demanding to know why she'd drag him into this given his own predicament. The young hero can only look down in silence, unable to find the right words to respond. Sif demands the full story, warning her against trying to manipulate her master. If she isn't honest, Sif declares they'll treat her as an enemy, so much for international cooperation. The sudden outburst startles Lifa as Kaido's familiars stand ready to defend him. Lifa's tough exterior finally gives way, revealing her true motive. She's searching for her sister. Kaido is stunned as she explains that her twin vanished without a trace 2 years ago. Still, Sif remains skeptical, questioning why she needs Kaido's specific power for a simple search mission. Lifa's expression darkens as she prepares to reveal a devastating, hidden truth. She confesses the unthinkable. Her sister is now a part of the Demon Lord's army. Kaido can only stare in disbelief, his mind reeling from this impossible revelation. Even the usually composed Sif is left completely floored by this shocking turn of events. Lifa explains that her sister is using her monstrous power to harm others, and she must be stopped. Since Kaido is the hero, their paths are bound to cross, leading Sif to ask how strong this sister really is. Lifa drops the ultimate bombshell. Her twin is a high-ranking executive in the Demon Lord's forces. Kaido's mind flashes back to the Orochi, wondering if Lifa's sister truly possesses that same terrifying level of power. Lifa admits she's desperate to stop her twin, but she's powerless to do it alone, while her own abilities remain untamed. Her voice cracks as tears well up in her eyes, fueling a desperate plea for help. The tough facade she once wore has completely crumbled, replaced by the raw vulnerability of a girl trapped in an impossible situation. She bows her head in silence, leaving Kaido and his familiars to process the weight of her heavy request. Sif immediately voices her objection, warning Kaido that the plan is far too reckless to even consider. However, she clarifies that the final, life-altering decision rests solely with her master. No pressure, right? Kaido stands there stunned, questioning if a choice this monumental is truly his to make. Sif and Lime offer their unwavering loyalty, making it clear they'll follow him down whatever path he chooses. But Kaido's mind is pulled elsewhere, focused on the goal he's pursued since day one, finding Shishihara. He weighs his options carefully, knowing this girl is begging for his help, and he's the only one capable of providing it. Kaido realizes that this is a burden only he can carry. After all, if he's the only person in the world she can turn to, how could he say no? With a warm, reassuring smile, Kaido makes his choice and offers Lifa his strength. The young hero is absolutely floored by how quickly and selflessly he accepts the mission. She asks if he's truly certain, reminding him of his friend waiting in the other kingdom. Kaido admits he's worried, but he's confident that Shishihara is safe for the time being. He tells Lifa that right now, she's the one facing the more immediate threat. Overwhelmed by his kindness, the hero can only break down in tears of pure relief. And just like that, a powerful new alliance is officially forged. Through tears of relief, Lifa offers her heartfelt gratitude to Kaido. A few days later, the scene shifts back to the bustling capital city of Hendel. Kaido stands center stage, prepared for his official adventurer induction ceremony. The guildmaster formally welcomes Arihara Kaido into their prestigious ranks. Kaido beams with pride, finally recognized as a true adventurer of this world. He's presented with his guild card, the ultimate proof of his hard-earned success. Lifa watches from the crowd, clutching her own card, eager to begin a new journey with her ally. His loyal familiars, Sif and Lime, watch the ceremony proudly from the sidelines. Even Lyra is present, cheering louder than anyone for her newfound friend. Even the stoic Gil manages a rare, supportive smirk for the promising recruit. With their alliance forged, Kaido and Lifa make their way through the guild halls. However, their stroll is quickly interrupted by the guildmaster, Bels. He reveals the castle has confirmed Lifa's identity, shocked to learn she is the hero. Caught off guard, Lifa can only apologize for keeping her true status a secret. But Bels dismisses her worries, having already heard the full scope of her story. He turns his attention to Kaido, formally requesting he lend his strength to the hero. He warns that aiding her means facing threats as lethal as the Orochi. No pressure, right? That grim reality check is enough to send a cold shiver down Kaido's spine. He admits that hearing the stakes laid out so plainly is absolutely petrifying. But his fear quickly gives way to resolve. He's committed to being the shield she needs. Belch warns that this decision will make traveling to the other kingdom far more difficult. But Kaido remains steadfast, knowing he can reunite with Shishihara eventually now that her safety is guaranteed. More importantly, he knows that abandoning Lifa would haunt him for the rest of his days. Lifa watches him, her heart swelling with gratitude for his incredibly selfless sacrifice. The guildmaster closes his eyes with a knowing smirk, clearly respecting the young man's unwavering resolve. He promises to convey Kaido's intentions to the Filjan kingdom, earning a sincere thank you from our protagonist. A few days later, Lyra strolls with the fresh recruits, congratulating them on passing their exams. She observes with a smile that the group has already formed their own party. Lyra then turns to Lifa, praising her for the near-superhuman agility she displayed during the trial. As she introduces herself, Kaido can't help but wonder how she'd react to Lifa's true job title. Lyra asks Lifa if she has any immediate plans now that the exam is finally behind them. Since their schedule is clear, she suggests they all head out for a well-deserved celebration. That celebration manifests as a massive, mouth-watering feast for the whole group. Back at the inn, Lifa finds herself completely spellbound by Melk's legendary culinary skills. She asks if both Kaido and Lyra live there, and our boy confirms that they do. Lifa falls into deep thought as a bold new idea begins to take shape in her mind. Without missing a beat, she arrives at a sudden, life-altering decision. She announces she's moving in too, citing the cozy atmosphere and the top-tier food. But her true motive is far simpler. She just wants to be by Kaido's side. So much for subtlety. This blunt confession leaves both Kaido and Lyra absolutely stunned into silence. Kaido realizes her sudden obsession is likely just another unintended side effect of his pure magic. Without another word, she bolts to pack her things, leaving the others standing there in a daze. Lyra turns to Kaido, teasing that he's become quite the local celebrity for a newcomer. She mocks him relentlessly for charming the new girl, noting that his plan to keep a low profile is officially dead. He spends the entire walk home frantically denying it, but Lyra just laughs off his desperate excuses. In record time, Lifa reappears lugging a massive backpack, leaving the pair completely speechless. Even the stoic innkeeper, Melk, looks caught off guard by this sudden turn of events. She marches to the counter and demands the room right next to Kaido's, much to his absolute horror. Kaido immediately panics, realizing his personal space is about to vanish entirely. He tries to object, but the oblivious hero has no idea why he's acting so flustered. Melk simply asks if there's an issue, while Lyra encourages her to just let the girl have her way. Lifa turns to Kaido with a soul-crushing pout, asking if he truly doesn't want her around. Kaido can only break into a cold sweat, completely defeated by her emotional manipulation. He finally caves, and Lifa's triumphant cheer echoes through the halls as she claims her new territory. A few days later, Lifa calls out to him, pumped and ready for their first official day as a party. She's decked out in brand new gear, looking every bit the part of a seasoned warrior. Armed with fresh pouches and a sharp blade, she's ready for whatever the world throws at them. Flashing a warm smile, she asks her new partner if he's ready to head out. Kaido, now sporting his own upgraded equipment, grins back and confirms he's more than prepared. With a new dagger strapped to his hip, his journey as a brawling tamer is officially underway. Meanwhile, Lime has claimed a new favorite perch, happily hanging from Kaido's belt. Lifa offers a compliment on his new gear, which Kaido accepts with a confident smirk. However, Sif is in a total panic, its eyes wide with an inexplicable sense of dread. It explains that the hat helps it avoid being mistaken for a monster, a practical, if slightly paranoid, fashion statement. Besides, the creature admits it prefers its feline form anyway, affectionately nuzzling against its master's cheek. Lifa notes that Lime seems to have found a cozy little spot for itself as well. Kaido is simply relieved to see his new partner bonding so well with his familiars. With the team finally assembled, Kaido declares it's time to tackle their very first official quest. Right on cue, a familiar voice calls out as Lyra approaches the group. She greets the fledgling party, confirming that today marks the start of their debut mission. Lyra explains that because of their stellar exam scores, they've earned the right to take on monster-slaying quests immediately. She offers them a safer entry-level option, but Kaido and Lifa are clearly hungry for a real challenge. With their minds made up, the duo officially accepts their first monster subjugation request. Their mission leads them to a sprawling open field, currently plagued by aggressive local beasts. Kaido charges headfirst into the fray, brandishing his makeshift staff to strike down the wolf-like creatures. Lifa moves like a total blur, her twin blades carving through the monsters with lethal precision. Terrified by the overwhelming power of these new adventurers, the remaining creatures scatter and flee. Kaido smiles, confident the fields are finally safe from the kobold threat, so much for a difficult first day. He turns to check on his partner, making sure she's unscathed after the skirmish. Lifa gazes at her blades, realizing that with Kaido by her side, she can finally fight without losing control. Sif is pleased, noting that they've made an incredible start to their adventuring careers. Their journey continues, leading them across a vast and unforgiving landscape. Their next quest brings them to a dark tunnel, where Kaido calls out to Lifa in concern. However, the hero is completely incapacitated, overwhelmed by the atmosphere inside. Standing over her, Kaido realizes this foul-smelling tunnel is a sensory death trap they can't endure together. He realizes Lifa's heightened senses can't handle the stench, leaving him to face the trial alone. Thus, Lifa is forced to wait outside, frustrated that she can't assist her partner. She springs to her feet the moment Kaido finally emerges, his task seemingly finished. He offers a weak thumbs up, though both look utterly drained from the ordeal, so much for an easy day. But adventuring isn't all high-stakes monster slaying. They also tackle mundane chores like weeding gardens. They even accept a quest to find a lost pet, though Lifa seems less than thrilled about the assignment. Since Kaido's animal-repelling curse is still very much active, the simple rescue quickly turns into a nightmare. They take on every job imaginable, from backbreaking manual labor to simple errands. A full month passes as they steadily build a reputation for being reliable adventurers. After another grueling day, they finally settle down to roast their fresh catch over a crackling fire. While Kaido and his familiars relax, Lifa remains completely mesmerized by the cooking food. Her stomach lets out a desperate growl as her hunger wins the battle against her composure. Kaido offers a reassuring smile, promising the fish will be ready to eat in just a moment. But she's so dazed by hunger that she accidentally calls him Mama, completely shattering her stoic hero act. Kaido reflects on their progress, realizing they've finally adjusted to the rhythm of this new life. Kaido admits that tearing through all these monsters has definitely made him feel a bit more powerful. However, he quickly notes that none of their opponents have truly tested his limits yet. Lifa feels it too, a sense of personal growth she never experienced while adventuring alone. She wonders if this newfound clarity is all thanks to the soothing influence of Kaido's magic. But she soon realizes that his raw power isn't the only reason for her change of heart. She recalls the advice to find companions she can trust, a lesson that is finally starting to click. With Kaido and Sif by her side, she's certain she can reach even greater heights. Lime can only offer a silent, wobbly wiggle in complete agreement. Kaido's warm smile proves he values their new partnership just as much as she does. Even Sif looks satisfied as the party finally finds their perfect rhythm. Sif then asks Lifa if she's expected to report her findings back to the royal castle. Kaido immediately tenses up, asking if she's already told the kingdom about his existence. She admits she has, but for now, the authorities haven't requested a formal meeting. Our protagonist breathes a massive sigh of relief, confessing he's absolutely terrified of meeting royalty. With the heavy political talk over, Kaido turns his attention back to finishing their dinner. He eventually stands up, deciding to scavenge for some extra firewood to keep the camp bright. Lifa offers to lend a hand, but Kaido assures her he'll be perfectly fine on his own. He ventures a short distance into the brush, searching for some suitable branches. However, his search is abruptly interrupted by a sharp, stinging pain in his hand. He looks down to find a small laceration, with a single drop of blood beginning to pool. He spins around, sensing a presence nearby and bracing for another monster attack. Instead, a massive white wolf emerges from the treeline, its eyes glowing with an eerie red light. Rather than lunging, the beast wags its tail, causing Kaido to drop his firewood in pure shock. The creature nuzzles against his hand, leaving the young man frozen in a state of utter disbelief. His mind begins to reel, wondering if this is a vivid dream or some kind of twisted illusion. Hesitantly, he reaches out, his fingers finally making contact with its impossibly soft fur. A sudden realization hits him. This is the first time in his entire life he's ever pet an animal. Taking a closer look, he realizes this isn't some stray dog, but a powerful, full-grown wolf. He offers a small smile, deciding it doesn't matter, it's adorable, and it isn't running away. However, as he continues to pet it, his hand suddenly sinks into its face, as if it were made of wet clay. Kaido's heart skips a beat as the wolf's features begin to flicker with a blinding flash of light. Within seconds, the creature dissolves into a wisp of smoke, vanishing back into the dark forest. He's left standing there stunned, watching his only friendly encounter of the day evaporate into nothingness. Suddenly, Sif comes charging through the brush, screaming his name in a total panic. Lifa follows close behind, asking what's wrong while her mouth is still stuffed with their dinner. Sif frantically asks if he's okay, explaining that she sensed a violent shift in his magical energy. The shapeshifter's eyes narrow, her intuition telling her that something is definitely wrong. But Kaido just brushes it off with a smile, claiming he was just playing with a friendly wolf. Sif's body tenses up, her instincts screaming that they are in serious danger. She immediately slaps her master, calling him a complete idiot for being so incredibly careless. Sif explains that the wolf was no ordinary beast. It used Kaido's blood to force a contract upon him. Kaido stands there, completely floored by this impossible revelation. But Sif is livid, scolding him for looking so thrilled about such a dangerous situation. She explains that a monster initiating a pact is unheard of, suggesting this creature possesses a terrifying level of intelligence. Kaido can only offer a sheepish apology, while Sif continues her relentless lecture on his lack of caution. Meanwhile, Lifa reflects on the encounter, identifying the creature as a rare white wolf. Deep within the moonlit forest, that very same white wolf pads silently through the shadows. It approaches two shrouded figures, one of whom warmly welcomes the beast back. The long-haired woman asks if it successfully gathered intel on the two adventurers. She notes its high-ranking aura, but her companion dismisses the creature as nothing more than a temporary familiar. The woman playfully pokes the wolf's snout, as if testing the integrity of its physical form. She hums thoughtfully, mentally cataloging the information the creature has retrieved. Her companion then asks Iris if she's ever heard of the legendary pure magic. Iris explains it's an ancient, rare power once used as a tribute to primordial beasts. With the wolf trailing behind her, Iris begins to walk away, leaving her partner in the dust. A wicked grin spreads across her face as she plots a little trick for her sister. Back in the city, Kaido and Lifa prepare to set out on the next leg of their journey. Kaido happily pets a massive steed, while Sif perches comfortably on his shoulder. Lifa admits she was anxious about the trip, but notices the demonic horse is surprisingly calm. Sif explains that unlike normal animals, demonic beasts aren't repelled by Kaido's overwhelming aura. Lifa eagerly reaches out, hoping to pet the demonic beast herself. However, her friendly gesture is repaid with a face full of demonic horse slobber. The creature's low growl confirms its disdain for humans, so much for a pleasant ride. Just then, a familiar face approaches, and Kaido recognizes his former exam proctor, Rick. The gold-rank adventurer flashes a smile, asking if the new recruits are ready for departure. Kaido and Lifa confirm they're set, mentally prepared for their first major expedition. They set off in a carriage, with the legendary Rick himself acting as their personal chauffeur. The journey leads them far beyond the capital's safety and into the untamed wilderness. Kaido can't help but wonder if they're truly worthy of accompanying a powerhouse like him. Rick explains their objective is to hunt a griffin, a perfect learning opportunity for the duo. Lifa confidently declares that they could likely take the beast down on their own. But Rick's piercing gaze instantly shatters her confidence, reminding her of the beast's true ferocity. He clarifies that their role is strictly to observe, much to Lifa's utter disappointment. Even Sif tries to talk sense into her, admitting they aren't ready for such a formidable foe. Yet Lifa remains frustrated, desperate for a real challenge to accelerate her growth. Kaido watches her closely, fearing her desperation to save her sister will lead to a fatal blunder. Seeing her drive, Rick seems to sympathize with her impatience and finally relents. He offers them a chance to prove their worth, promising to test their skills once they set up camp. This unexpected proposition leaves both Kaido and Lifa absolutely floored. As the carriage rolls on, a grueling new trial awaits them at the end of the road. Unleashing a fierce battle cry, Kaido hurls himself at the gold-rank veteran. Steel clashes against steel as Lifa watches the duel with bated breath. Her eyes are filled with anxiety, knowing their true growth is being put to the ultimate test. Rick admits that the boy's movements have certainly become more polished. However, he warns that Kaido is still light years away from being a true warrior. He cautions that relying solely on slime transformations won't carry him through every battle. A brief flashback reveals that Rick has survived horrors on an entirely different scale. Kaido confesses his lack of weapon mastery, a harsh reality for a supposedly elite tamer. Rick counters that a master creates their own openings before striking with their deadliest asset. To prove his point, he casually retrieves a simple rock from the dirt. Kaido's gaze sharpens, desperate to absorb every ounce of the veteran's wisdom. He lunges forward once more, but Rick stands like a statue, letting the strike whistle past. The proctor then reveals his next weapon, nothing more than a simple length of rope. Before Kaido can even blink, a makeshift snare snaps tightly around his ankle. He's violently swept off his feet, his lesson in humility delivered with painful precision. With Kaido neutralized, Rick shifts his focus to Leafa for her own trial by fire. Watching from the dirt, a look of dawning realization finally washes over Kaido's face. Sif explains to Lime that rapid-fire transformations are the secret to generating openings. Kaido clenches his fist, realizing he needs a flexible strategy rather than just brute force. With the first lesson concluded, Rick beckons Leafa forward. It's her turn to face the heat. Their grueling training session continues in a sprawling clearing beside a serene lake. Leafa unleashes a blindingly fast strike, her movements now sharp and surgical. Rick parries the blow, noting she had the speed during the exam, but something has fundamentally changed. Her hands tense as she prepares her next move, with the grace of a seasoned warrior. Using his own shoulders as a springboard, she launches herself into the air with explosive force. A flicker of genuine surprise crosses Rick's face as she sticks a perfect landing right behind him. A confident smirk spreads across her face, having executed the maneuver flawlessly. Rick is impressed, realizing she's finally utilizing her shadow, stepping with a calm, composed mind. She follows up with a heavy punch, screaming out the name of her attack for good measure. But he catches her fist effortlessly, reminding her that shouting your moves only works in anime. Rick asks if she truly has the resolve to win, leaving her wearing a mask of pure shock. Her focus shatters instantly, and she trips, landing in a clumsy, defeated heap on the ground. Rick looms over her, admitting her technique has improved now that she isn't blinded by rage. However, he presses her further, asking why she refuses to tap into the monster's power within her. Leafa can only look away, tears welling in her eyes as she remains unable to answer. Kaido steps in, wondering if his pure magic could help her finally tame that inner darkness. But she admits they've tried that before, and the result was far too catastrophic. Kaido suddenly recalls a previous training session that went completely off the rails. A memory flashes of her losing control, going feral, and biting him in a bloodthirsty haze. Rick simply tells her she must work until she can master both sides of her fractured power. Leafa clenches her fist, taking his blunt but necessary critique to heart. Rick then shifts his focus to her magic, the other half of her combat arsenal. However, he admits he's clueless about shadow magic and tells her to just figure it out herself. So much for a detailed training plan. Leafa is left completely floored by his dismissive and unhelpful advice. The two rookies stand there in silence, reeling from their mentor's brutal honesty. Yet Rick acknowledges that despite the tough love, their progress is undeniable. He then singles out Leifa's overconfidence, calling it a fatal flaw for any serious adventurer. He warns them both that without true respect for the craft, they'll never survive this line of work. Leafa bows her head, silently absorbing the veteran's hard-earned wisdom. Kaido, on the other hand, just beams, grateful for any lesson from a legend like Rick. As the day winds down, Kaido reflects on how lucky he is to be part of this mission. Night eventually falls, casting a pale glow over the silent, jagged mountain peaks. With the carriage parked for the night, even their demonic steed finds a moment of peace. While Leafa sleeps, Kaido and Rick share a quiet moment together by the flickering campfire. Kaido asks about Rick's magic, curious since he didn't see him cast a single spell during the exam. Rick's cryptic answer about sword shape-shifting leaves Kaido completely bewildered. Rick explains that it's a specialized magic that alters the physical form of a specific object. But he quickly shuts down the lesson, admitting that explaining the mechanics is a massive pain. He simply tells Kaido to keep his eyes peeled and see it for himself when they face the griffin. Kaido can only conclude that his new mentor is a man of incredibly few words. Rick deftly pivots the conversation, probing into the nature of Kaido and Leifa's relationship, all while the legendary hero herself is allegedly sound asleep just inches away. He teases the young man, hinting that at his age, the implications should be obvious. Kaido can only break into a cold sweat, finding the legendary warrior more like a nosy uncle than a hero. He tries to shut the conversation down, insisting he has no interest in her complicated personal life. Rick merely yawns, dismissing such a serious answer as incredibly dull. Kaido clarifies that he views her more as a little sister in need of his protection. However, his calm explanation is abruptly cut short by a sudden, aggressive grab. A foot snags his shirt with shocking strength, instantly shattering any hope for a peaceful night. The supposedly sleeping Leafa yanks him toward her, leaving Kaido paralyzed with fear. Even in her deep slumber, her grip on his clothes remains incredibly firm. Kaido tries to cover her up, worried her chaotic sleeping habits will lead to her catching a cold. Rick suddenly labels him a disappointment, leaving Kaido utterly baffled by the random insult. The veteran nonchalantly brushes it off, acting as if he hadn't said anything at all. He then smiles, admitting he's just relieved their dynamic is solid, revealing this whole ordeal was just a test of patience. Kaido can only stare in confusion, completely lost by his mentor's bizarre interrogation. Rick tosses him a sleeping bag, advising him to rest up for the grueling journey ahead. But Kaido remains preoccupied with those words, wondering who else Rick could have been referring to. A few days pass, and their carriage finally pulls into its destination. Rick announces their arrival as Kaido marvels at the sheer scale of the Hendel Kingdom. He realizes that even with a solid plan, reuniting with Shishihara won't be a walk in the park. However, his internal monologue is shattered by a blood-curdling screech echoing through the woods. Rick instantly recognizes the cry of a griffin, noting they're twice as feral during mating season. Kaido's face pales as he begins to doubt whether they're truly prepared for a beast of this caliber. Rick simply waves off the concern, ordering the group to press forward with absolute confidence. The trio pushes deeper into the dense thicket, following the light of their legendary mentor. Suddenly, Rick signals for them to stop, bringing their progress to a dead, silent halt. There it is, their target, a massive griffin, its beak unhinged in a deafening, furious roar. The creature looms over them from a jagged peak, its territorial cry vibrating through the entire valley. While Kaido confirms the beast's identity, Leafa's keen eyes catch sight of something moving below the nest. She spots a pack of savage, wolf-like predators prowling through the shadows. Rick identifies them as rage wolves, scavengers waiting for the griffin to leave behind its scraps. Flashing a cocky grin, he asks his two pupils if they're ready for a surprise pop quiz. Kaido and Leafa are momentarily stunned by the sudden, high-stakes challenge. But they quickly find their resolve and shout back in unison, eager to prove their growth. Rick quickly outlines the strategy. He'll take the lead while they deal with the welcoming committee. Before they can even blink, the legendary adventurer disappears in a sheer blur of speed. Kaido stands there in shock, genuinely questioning if the man just used a teleportation spell. But Leafa snaps him out of it, screaming his name as she points toward the griffin's nest. Rick is already airborne, having cleared the entire valley in a single, massive leap, so much for a stealthy approach. Kaido recognizes Rick's shape-shifting sword magic as the blade fractures into a whirlwind of steel. Shaking off his amazement, Kaido bellows that it's time to move, and Leafa nods in agreement. With a fierce war cry, Kaido grips his staff and prepares to dive headfirst into the chaos. As they charge, Kaido commands Sif to imbue Leafa's blades with a surge of lightning. Sif's magic crackles with intensity, coating the twin daggers in raw electrical energy. Leafa's eyes sharpen, her focus narrowing as she prepares to unleash a devastating storm. The rage wolves howl in agony as her lightning-fast strikes electrocute the entire pack. Kaido directs her to take the left flank, their coordination reaching a perfect rhythm. A lone wolf lunges forward, its fangs bared in a desperate, final attempt to kill. Kaido meets it with a brutal right hook, reminding everyone why he's the ultimate brawling tamer. He slams his staff down with crushing force, shattering the skull of another beast. Despite the carnage, the rest of the pack surges forward, unfazed by their fallen kin. Recalling Rick's training, Kaido lashes out with a rope, snaring the lead wolf midair. He redirects its momentum, slamming the beast into the dirt, so much for a simple pop quiz. With the opening established, he barks a fresh set of orders to his familiars. He drives his weapon into the earth, formulating a new strategy on the fly. Lime transforms into a massive flaming axe, ready to deliver a finishing blow. He debuts a brand new technique, a slime volcano that completely swallows the pack. Kaido grins, satisfied with the results, and pondering a name for his invention. He finally settles on a title for his new signature move, Shadow Swamp. The remaining wolves are hopelessly trapped in the sticky black substance, completely immobilized. Leafa explains the effects of her paralysis, her expression remaining cold and focused. With one final, brutal flurry of strikes, the last of the rage wolves are wiped out. Kaido reflects on their progress, realizing Rick's grueling lessons have finally paid off in a real fight. He marvels at Leafa's skill, noting that her power feels more like a hero-esque than a monster's. Leafa retorts that his own moves were barely human, though Kaido just laughs it off as a compliment. Their victory celebration is cut short, however, as they wonder what became of their mentor. Their eyes widen in pure, unadulterated shock as they look toward the peak. Rick is already standing atop the griffin's corpse, the beast impaled by a dozen swords, so much for a long boss fight. Kaido can only stare in awe, questioning if this is the true, terrifying power of a gold-rank adventurer. Rick approaches his exhausted students, offering a rare bit of praise for a job well done. But his expression suddenly shifts, his sharp eyes catching a dark movement in the distance. He warns them that something massive is approaching, leaving Kaido and Leafa looking on in confusion. From the tree line, a massive, organized army of monsters begins its deadly march. The sky suddenly fills with winged creatures, an aerial assault force descending upon their position. On the ground, a legion of armored beasts charges forward with chilling military precision. These flying soldiers are humanoid griffins, all clad in matching, ominous black armor. Their ground support is just as terrifying, a pack of equally armored, battle-hardened wolves. Rick is stunned, realizing these are trained soldiers, not wild beasts. This just became more than a simple hunt. As the winged soldiers circle overhead, it becomes clear that this is no random encounter, it's an ambush. Kaido stares in paralyzed shock, his mind racing as he questions the origin of this mysterious new army. Leafa is equally horrified, frozen as she struggles to process the nightmare unfolding before her. But Rick steps forward, ordering his students to retreat as he prepares to face the entire horde single-handedly. A warning shot strikes the ground at his feet, a clear sign that the enemy is locked and loaded. Kaido immediately screams for Leafa, urging her that they need to evacuate the area immediately. She looks back, a determined glint in her eyes, as she acknowledges the desperate command. But a sudden volley of magical strikes rains down, forcing the two rookies to scatter for cover. Kaido's eyes widen in pure, unadulterated terror as the situation spirals out of control. He shoves Leafa out of harm's way, screaming her name just as a lethal attack closes in. He calls out to Lime, who instantly forms a shield, proving that a slime truly is a tamer's best friend. His face becomes a mask of pure agony as the force of the explosion connects. The sheer power of the blast sends him skyrocketing, his body ragdolling helplessly through the air. He slams into the earth, tumbling violently away from the epicenter of the devastating impact. Leafa can do nothing but scream his name, watching the carnage in horror from a distance. But then an unexpected figure emerges from the tree line, offering a chillingly casual wave. She calmly observes how Kaido just risked everything to protect her younger sister. With a sinister smile, she addresses him by his full name, Arihara Kaido. Kaido surfaces, gasping for air, as his companion urges him to swim for the safety of the shore. But they're caught in a violent current, swept away from the chaos in a classic monologue-induced escape. And to make matters worse, a terrifying new monster begins its descent from the clouds. High above the battlefield, Rick finds himself swarmed by a legion of winged soldiers. Letting out a primal roar, he vows to incinerate every last one of them. With a flick of his wrist, a tempest of magical daggers erupts from his unique blade. The gold-rank powerhouse transforms into a literal whirlwind of death and steel. From the shadows of the forest, Leafa's sister watches the monsters plummet from the sky. She smirks, conceding that Rick is a decent enough warm-up act for her forces. However, she knows he's nothing more than a footnote compared to the carnage coming next. Elsewhere, Leafa carves a bloody path through a pack of armored wolves. She screams in desperation, her only focus being to reach Arihara's side. Her sister observes that without Arihara holding her back, Leafa is finally unleashing her raw, untamed potential. Licking her lips, the villainess notes that his pure mana looks absolutely divine. The white wolf familiar pads silently back to its master's side. With a sinister grin, she prepares to execute the next phase of her battle plan. She places a hand on the wolf's head, telepathically relaying her commands. With one final order, she sends the borrowed familiar back into the fray. The beast tears into the ground, vanishing into the earth in a swirl of dark magic. With her messenger away, she decides it's finally time to join the fun herself. Back in the heat of battle, Leafa fights with frantic fury while her sister's voice taunts her. The villainous sister grins, threatening to strip away everything Leafa holds dear. Meanwhile, Shiv can do nothing but scream Arihara's name as the chaos sweeps him away. Arihara slowly regains consciousness on a jagged, rocky riverbank. He sits up dazed, his mind racing to piece together what happened after the massive explosion. Stumbling to his feet, he thanks Skiff for dragging him out of the water. But the shapeshifter quickly corrects him, admitting it wasn't the one who pulled him to safety. Just then, a familiar white wolf emerges, startling Arihara with a friendly bark. He immediately recognizes his first-ever animal friend, baffled as to how it tracked him down. Skiff reveals this is the same monster that forced a pact with him, though its motives remain a mystery. It's a good thing he didn't ghost his new familiar. Arihara offers the wolf his sincere thanks, and the creature happily accepts the gratitude. Looking down the river, he realizes the current has swept them miles away from the heat of battle. Skiff suggests they head back to find Rick, and Arihara agrees, ready to get moving. However, he suddenly notices Lime is missing, and Skiff assumes it must have stayed behind with Lifa. The white wolf barks again, desperately trying to get Arihara's attention. Skiff translates, explaining that the wolf wants to lend Arihara its formidable strength. Seeking a second opinion, Arihara asks Skiff, who agrees that this intelligent monster is trustworthy for now. With his mind made up, Arihara accepts the help, and the trio begins the long journey back. Their new familiar leads the way, guiding them deep into a dense, unfamiliar forest. Arihara struggles to keep up, already feeling the grueling strain of the trek. Skiff asks if he's holding up, and Arihara admits the sweltering heat is starting to take its toll. But the wolf's ears suddenly twitch, sensing an ominous change in the atmosphere. Without warning, a strange, thick mist erupts around them, catching Arihara completely off guard. To Arihara's surprise, the mist feels incredibly cool and refreshing. The white wolf is the source, controlling the winds with a joyful bark. Schiff notes that the beast seems remarkably docile for a high-level monster. Arihara thanks his new ally and decides it's finally time to give it a proper name. He asks for permission, and the wolf responds with an excited howl. After a brief moment of contemplation, he settles on the perfect title. He proposes the name Hakuro, and the wolf's eyes instantly ignite with joy. The newly christened Hakuro wags its tail in delight. It's definitely an upgrade from Jacob. However, their bonding is cut short when a sudden, ominous presence fills the air. Hakuro lets out a vicious snarl, sensing a group of predators closing in fast. A pack of lizard men emerges from the tree line, their predatory gaze fixed on Arihara. Schiff identifies them as dragon kin, the lesser relatives of the legendary Orochi. The spirit warns that if they're caught, they'll be eaten alive, truly a comforting thought. But Arihara steels his resolve, prepared to face this new threat head-on. Meanwhile, the main battlefield has become a graveyard of fallen monsters. The mighty griffin lies dead, a brutal testament to Rick's overwhelming strength. The rage wolves have been completely wiped out, their howls silenced forever. Deep in the forest, Rick and Lifa are forced into a desperate retreat. He calls out to the hero, who continues to push forward without a second thought. Rick finally intercepts her, warning that she'll collapse if she doesn't stop to rest. He hands a bottle of water to the exhausted hero, trying to settle her nerves. She begins to blame herself for the disaster, but Rick insists the failure was entirely his. He questions the monster's sudden appearance, realizing they weren't just roaming, they were being hunted. Leifa confirms his darkest fears. These were elite soldiers from the Demon Lord's army. Rick is floored, demanding to know how she could possibly possess such classified information. She finally drops the bombshell. They were after her because she is the kingdom's legendary hero. The revelation leaves Rick completely speechless. Could a true hero really be part of his ragtag party? As his mind reels, he's forced to accept this unbelievable new reality. While taking a drink, she suddenly senses a familiar, infuriating presence. Her sister is nearby. She grips the canteen tight, her thoughts consumed by the memory of her long-lost twin. Leifa's expression hardens as she vows not to hold back in this brewing family feud. Meanwhile, Arihara is already in the thick of it, having already dispatched 2 lizard men. The remaining monsters are paralyzed with shock, staring at their fallen comrades in disbelief. But Arihara gives them no room to breathe, immediately landing a devastating punch. He moves with newfound grace, effortlessly weaving through their clumsy, desperate swings. He follows up with a crushing kick that sends another monster soaring through the air. However, reinforcements quickly arrive, heavily armed and ready for a genuine brawl. He launches himself forward with a massive flying body press, a classic wrestling move, naturally. The remaining creatures are scattered like bowling pins, completely overwhelmed by his raw strength. Standing victorious, he mocks his foes, asking how they like the bite of a cornered human. His victory is fleeting, however, as a fresh wave of lizardmen swarms the area. Arihara realizes he's vastly outnumbered, and he won't survive a prolonged battle of attrition. With his back against the wall and no exit in sight, he prepares to make a final stand. Suddenly, Hakuro barks, demanding his new master's immediate attention. Skiff translates, explaining that the wolf needs to borrow Arihara's mana for the coming clash. Arihara nods, placing his absolute trust in his surprisingly clever new companion. But the instant he makes contact, a violent surge of energy nearly stops his heart. The mana transfer is overwhelming, nearly buckling his knees as he acts like a human battery. When he looks up, Hakuro is completely engulfed in a shroud of brilliant, magical flames. The wolf lets out a thunderous, fiery howl that leaves the lizardmen paralyzed with fear. The sheer pressure of the transformation knocks Arihara flat on his back. The lizardmen's advance halts instantly, pinned down by an invisible, crushing weight. Our protagonist can only watch in awe, struggling to comprehend the chaos unfolding. Skiff's voice cuts through the noise, screaming for him to stay down. A gargantuan, scaly tail tears through the air, effortlessly bisecting a lizardman in its path. The onslaught continues as another monster is sent soaring with a bone-shattering crunch. The entire pack is decimated by that single, devastating strike. Talk about an absolute unit of a pet. Skiff is left speechless, finally realizing the sheer power of the beast Arihara just tamed. Hakuro sits calmly amidst the carnage, wagging his tail like the world's deadliest good boy. As the dust finally settles, the morning sun begins to crest over the distant mountain peaks. With the battle behind them, Hakuro guides Arihara and Skiff deeper into the dense woodland. However, as the hours crawl by, the exhaustion of their grueling trek begins to take its toll on Arihara. He voices his concern to Skiff, fearing they're wandering further away from their allies rather than closing the gap. The shapeshifter concedes that while Hakuro appears docile, the wolf's true intentions remain an enigma. Suddenly, the beast sprints forward, completely disregarding Arihara's frantic shouts to wait. It lures them into a jagged rocky clearing before abruptly halting its pace. Hakuro turns with a menacing low growl, his friendly facade vanishing in an instant, so much for man's best friend. Waiting for them is a fox-eared woman, who dryly remarks that she was growing weary of their tardiness. Arihara stands frozen in utter confusion, completely blindsided by the mysterious newcomer. She introduces herself as Nia, chillingly revealing that she knows Arihara Kaito's full identity. Horror dawns in his eyes as the pieces fall into place. He doesn't even need an explanation. With a smug grin, Nia confirms his worst suspicions. She is the long-lost twin sister of Leifa. She relishes the look of pure shock and recognition etched across his face. Flashing a wicked smile, she thanks him for his diligence and beckons him to approach. Arihara can only stare back in stunned silence, his mind reeling from the revelation. Hakuro dutifully pads over to Nia's side, finally exposing where his true loyalty lies. The weight of the betrayal hits home. His first animal companion was an enemy plant all along. Talk about a buzzkill. Hakuro avoids eye contact, letting out a soft, almost remorseful whimper. Nia finds the situation hilarious, mocking the fact that Arihara actually bothered to give the beast a name. But when she addresses him as Hakuro, the wolf snaps back with a snarl of pure, unadulterated loathing. Nia reveals everything she knows about him, the boy from another world and the trusted partner of her sister, the hero. Arihara wonders how she uncovered his past, and knowing he's facing a powerful commander, he wants no part of this fight. But Nia finds him far too intriguing to simply let him walk away, declaring she'll test his legendary power for herself. Left with no other choice, Arihara steels himself for the inevitable clash. But in a stunning betrayal, Hakuro lunges at Nia with fangs bared, so much for being a loyal minion. Arihara can only cry out the wolf's name, completely blindsided by the sudden turn of events. Hakuro looks back with a soft bark, making his true allegiance crystal clear. Nia realizes Arihara's pure magic has tamed a wind spirit, making his potential even more fascinating than she imagined. Skiff is speechless, a spirit. Arihara hadn't even realized such legendary beings actually existed. Skiff explains that for a spirit to manifest physically and defy its master is a total violation of natural law. Nia confirms she bound a wind spirit to forge her familiar, but its loyalty has clearly shifted. She coldly declares that any servant who dares to defy her must be ruthlessly punished. Radiating a sinister aura, she prepares to erase the rebellious spirit from existence. Desperate, Arihara rushes forward, screaming for her to stop the execution. In another startling move, Hakuro lunges forward and sinks his teeth into Arihara's arm. Even Nia is caught off guard, completely stunned by the wolf's unpredictable behavior. The wolf's fangs sink deep, but it quickly becomes clear that this is no ordinary attack. Hakuro's body begins to dissolve into shimmering magical light, certainly a dramatic way to quit your job. Nia watches in realization as the spirit begins transferring its very soul into Arihara. She simply smirks, admitting it's a clever trick, but ultimately insignificant in the face of her power. Arihara stands paralyzed as a surge of newfound power courses through his veins. He can feel Hakuro's raw fury, a burning hatred focused solely on Nia. Clenching his fist, he accepts the spirit's final, desperate offering. Skiff warns him that their opponent operates on a completely different level of power. But Arihara is undeterred, vowing to land at least one blow for Hakuro's sake. Nia simply smirks, delighted that he's finally showing some backbone. She tosses her swords aside, deciding they're unnecessary, a classic villain power move. With a wicked grin, she promises to go easy on the little otherworlder. In the blink of an eye, she closes the gap, her fist becoming a lethal blur. Arihara draws his dagger, bracing himself to meet her head-on. Nia moves like a phantom, raining down a barrage of deadly, high-speed strikes. Arihara struggles to keep pace, his eyes wide with sheer disbelief. A single devastating punch sends him reeling, knocking the wind right out of him. Gritting his teeth, he screams for Skiff to grant him even more power. Skiff complies, channeling its mana into him, despite the immense risk. Fueled by pure desperation, Arihara finally lands a solid hook right on her jaw. He clenches his hand, savoring this small victory in an otherwise losing battle. He follows up with a wild swing, pouring every ounce of his remaining strength into the strike. Nia lands gracefully, genuinely impressed by his reflexes, though this is still just a game to her. With zero effort, she sends him flying, reminding him of the massive chasm between their power. Nia maintains her relentless assault, driving a crushing kick toward the grounded Arihara. He quickly realizes his conventional fighting style is completely useless against her. With a roar of defiance, he seizes her leg, refusing to remain her punching bag any longer. Leveraging her own momentum, he slams the commander into the dirt with bone-shattering force. Skiff screams for him to end it, and Arihara winds up to deliver a decisive, finishing blow. However, Nia's sadistic grin reveals she's been merely toying with him this entire time. She erupts with a surge of dark energy, blasting Arihara backward and erasing his hard-won opening. He clutches his chest as a frigid, unnatural pain begins radiating through his entire body. Nia confesses that he actually forced her to use magic, impressed by his primal tenacity. She's now convinced he has the potential to one day serve within the Demon Lord's elite ranks. Nia scoffs, mocking Skiff for failing to understand the true nature of its own master. She gazes down at her palm, stained crimson by the blood from his desperate counterattack. Then, in a chilling display of madness, she slowly licks her hand clean. Arihara can only watch in pure revulsion, sickened by her twisted behavior. Her eyes bulge with manic delight as she recognizes the purity of his latent magic. Our hero is paralyzed with horror, realizing he's trapped in a cage with a total psychopath. She physically trembles, overwhelmed by the raw power contained in just a single drop of his blood. Her gaze suddenly sharpens, fueled by a terrifying and immediate new resolve. She boldly declares that she's going to claim him as her personal property, right here and now. But Arihara roars back in defiance, refusing to ever become anyone's plaything. Nia isn't taking no for an answer, declaring she'll drag him back by force if she has to. Arihara watches the swirling energy, recognizing the same deadly magic from their previous encounter. But just as tension peaks, a familiar voice echoes through the corridors of his mind. He freezes in shock, realizing the voice isn't coming from the room, but from within his own soul. His eyes drop to his arm, staring at the spot where Hakuro left his final mark. Even the formidable Nia is caught completely off guard by the sudden shift in the air. She demands to know what's happening to his arm, but Arihara is just as clueless as she is. Suddenly, his fist erupts in a violent torrent of wind, a raw power he's never felt before. The voice explains that the spirit he named has finally answered his call for help. Clenching his fist, he realizes Hakuro never truly left him. He's still here, lending him his strength. Channeling that resolve, he unleashes a massive vortex of wind that spirals out from his hand. With a thunderous cry, he summons Hakuro, who manifests as a towering, majestic spirit wolf. Nia can only watch in disbelief, stunned by this impossible and overwhelming surge of power. The massive spirit lunges forward, sinking its ethereal fangs deep into the commander's arm. But then the giant form vanishes, leaving a tiny, grumpy pup in its place, hardly an intimidating follow-up. Nia can't help but grin, absolutely thrilled by the spirit's defiance and Arihara's untapped potential. The spirit wolf returns to its true size, circling its new master with protective loyalty. Arihara offers a confident smile, calling out his companion's name with newfound pride. Hakuro looks back at him, a silent acknowledgement of their now unbreakable bond. The spirit then dissolves into light, its power flowing back into Arihara's arm for the battles to come. Arihara gazes at his fist, realizing this isn't merely raw power, it's a newfound ally. Nia reflects on the spirit's words, genuinely intrigued by this unprecedented bond. He lets out a roar, declaring that Hakuro is now under his absolute protection. Nia's smirk widens, clearly exhilarated by his reckless and defiant display. With a primal shout, Arihara readies himself to unleash his newfound strength. The commander simply goads him, demanding more, a classic villain relishing the spectacle. However, just as the clash is about to ignite, Lifa finally bursts onto the scene. Nia turns with a twisted smile, delighted that her dear sister has joined the fray. Arihara's expression softens, relieved to see that both Lifa and Lime are unharmed. Lime immediately reciprocates the love with an enthusiastic, full-face slime hug. He whispers an apology to the little slime, grateful to have his companion back in his hands. Arihara checks on Lifa, but her attention is already locked onto her sister. The hero's face contorts with fury as she spits out her long-lost sister's name. Nia merely smirks, welcoming her to their rather sentimental family reunion. The three stand in a tense standoff, the atmosphere heavy with years of unspoken history. Suddenly, Lifa dissolves into a pool of shadows, leaving Arihara utterly blindsided. She rematerializes in a flash, erupting from the earth directly behind Nia. With a vengeful scream, she lunges for the kill, so much for a heartwarming chat. The hero's blade slices through the air, a lethal blur aimed directly at her twin. But Nia effortlessly sidesteps, mockingly asking if this is any way to greet your own kin. Lifa screams at her sister, demanding to know why she provoked this battle. Nia just smirks, admitting she couldn't resist messing with her beloved sister, the new hero. The hero grits her teeth, her fury boiling over at the insult. But Nia's expression shifts, as if she's just noticed something interesting. She effortlessly blocks Lifa's punch, her raw strength proving far superior. Nia taunts her, claiming she'll never grow stronger while rejecting her monster blood. What a supportive sister. Lifa is stunned into silence as her sister's words cut deep and find their mark. Nia presses on, calling her a coward who's terrified of her own latent power. Arihara watches, realizing Lifa isn't just afraid of herself, but of accidentally hurting him. The hero finally snaps, screaming for her sister to shut her mouth. But Arihara grabs her arm, firmly telling her to stay calm. She looks up at him, his steady voice finally breaking through her blind rage. Nia continues her taunts from a distance, a smug grin plastered on her face. She warns them that relying on his pure magic will eventually reach its limit. Eventually, Lifa's monster instincts will take over and devour him, a truly heartwarming family prediction. But the hero roars back, vowing to never let that dark future come to pass. Nia just scoffs, calling her bluff with a condescending and icy smile. Arihara tells Lifa not to fall for her sister's twisted mind games. He asks about Rick, and Lifa confirms he's currently holding off the main army. She turns back to him, worried that he's far too exhausted to handle this fight. Arihara refuses to back down, vowing to stand by her side until the very end. Nia simply smirks, realizing she'll actually have to put in some effort for this 2-on-1. With a synchronized roar, Arihara and Lifa charge forward as a single, united front. Lifa takes point, unleashing a lethal volley of daggers toward her sister. Nia effortlessly bats them aside, mockingly complimenting her sister's improved aim. Arihara summons Hakuro, shrouding his blade in the spirit's ferocious wind magic. He vaults over the commander, aiming for a devastating surprise strike from above. She meets his blade with her own, impressed by the trick, a classic nothing personal kid moment. The sheer impact of their collision sends a violent shockwave rippling through the clearing. Arihara is sent reeling, but Nia is also forced to brace herself against his unexpected power. He calls upon Hakuro again, who manifests as a majestic spirit wolf to join the hunt. Lifa manipulates her shadow powers, gliding across the terrain to find a blind spot. Arihara rallies his familiars, preparing to unleash a devastating combination attack. He launches a lightning-infused strike, only for Nia to catch it with her bare hands. She actually seems to enjoy the surge, sporting a crazed smile, truly a healthy reaction to being electrocuted. Arihara is left shell-shocked as his ultimate trump card fails to leave a single scratch. Nia stands tall and unfazed, while the lightning crackles harmlessly across her skin. She casually parries Lifa's follow-up strike, laughing at her sister's desperate attempts. Arihara swings with every ounce of his strength, hoping to land a blow while she's occupied. But Nia dodges with predatory grace, treating their life-or-death struggle like a playground game. Leifa unleashes her shadow swamp, sending a torrent of darkness surging toward her sister. However, Nia merely scoffs, claiming she's already seen that trick before. Realizing he needs more, Arihara summons his trump card, a massive three-headed Orochi. Nia is instantly surrounded by the monstrous heads, yet her confident smile never wavers. Instead, she's thrilled, calling him a surprise box full of fascinating new tricks. Arihara is left stunned, as his most powerful attack is brushed aside like it's nothing. Desperate, he calls on Hakuro, ordering the spirit wolf to create a diversion. The wolf unleashes a raging vortex, but Nia stands calmly in the eye of the storm, completely unfazed. She points out that despite his immense power, his physical body remains dangerously fragile. Skiff screams a warning, telling its master that pushing his magic any further could be fatal. He realizes that wielding Hakuro's strength is draining his mana at an alarming rate. Nia ascends into the air, finally ready to put an end to this little game. She smirks, deciding it's time to literally cool things down for the both of them. But Arihara's gaze hardens as a desperate, last-ditch plan begins to take shape. The commander then unleashes a massive, bone-chilling wave of freezing mist. Arihara shoves Leifa behind him, acting as a human shield against the icy blast. He calls on Skiff once more, enchanting his blade with a roar of intense flames. Fire and ice collide, erupting into a blinding cloud of steam in a classic elemental showdown. Leifa can only watch in awe, paralyzed by this incredible display of raw power. But as the temperature drops, a deep-seated childhood trauma causes her to shiver uncontrollably. With a desperate roar, Arihara fights back against the biting, freezing mist. He seizes Leifa's hand, dragging her out of the blinding veil of steam. But the exertion leaves him utterly spent, and he collapses onto one knee. Nia looms over him, genuinely impressed he managed to tank her assault. Her hands remain encased in a thick layer of frost, her power still surging. She follows up with a savage kick, sending him tumbling across the clearing. Leifa can only cry out in horror as she watches him get tossed aside like a ragdoll. Nia wears a sadistic grin, telling her sister to sit back and enjoy the massacre. But Arihara isn't finished yet, intercepting another blow with his bare arm. The limb is instantly flash-frozen, the ice biting deep into his flesh. He grits his teeth in agony, realizing his arm has been frozen completely solid. Seeing him neutralized, Nia turns her murderous gaze back toward Leifa. She mockingly invites her sister to a duel, a classic villainous power move. But Leifa's expression is a mask of pure fury as she accepts the challenge. Nia lunges forward, her blade a lethal blur aimed straight for her sister. Leifa parries the strike, their steel clashing in a violent shower of sparks. The raw power of the impact sends Leifa reeling back, clearly outclassed. She gasps for air, the force of the blow leaving her battered and winded. Yet with a defiant roar, she refuses to yield and pushes through the pain. Suddenly, Nia's focus is shattered by something plummeting from the heavens. Nia parries the strike effortlessly, mocking her sister's clumsy and artless technique. Her gaze remains cold and calculating, utterly unimpressed by the hero's blind fury. She unleashes a lethal flurry of blows, driving Leifa back across the frozen clearing. The hero can do nothing but grit her teeth, realizing she's hopelessly outmatched by her own twin. Watching from the ground, Arihara realizes the gap in their experience is simply too vast to bridge. He desperately tries to melt the ice, but the magical frost is stubbornly clinging to his skin. The process is agonizing, and a guttural scream tears from his lips. A magical ice burn, how lovely. The shattered battlefield stands as a grim testament to Nia's overwhelming power. Yet Leifa refuses to surrender, her eyes still burning with unyielding defiance. Nia stalks forward with predatory grace, savoring every second of her sister's desperate struggle. Nia's blade flashes forward in a blur, a streak of cold and deadly steel. The hero is forced into a standstill, the freezing metal pressed firmly against her throat. Nia looms over her, questioning why she still refuses to embrace her true nature. Leifa merely grits her teeth in a rage, insisting she will never be anything like her sister. Nia calmly explains that their monster blood makes them eternal kin to to the Demon Lord's army. The hero screams back in denial, her defiance echoing across the desolate battlefield. Nia feigns a sigh of disappointment, lamenting her sister's wasted potential. Ah, the classic villain guilt trip. Her gaze then shifts, locking onto the boy still struggling to stand on the frozen earth. With his arm finally broken free, Arihara has officially become her primary target. Lifa can only watch in horror, realizing she's just been replaced as the center of Nia's malice. With a scream of agony, Arihara shatters the ice encasing his arm. Nia towers over her defeated twin, dismissing her as nothing more than a worthless obstacle. Her face is a mask of cold, condescending pity. Lifa can only gasp her sister's name, her eyes wide with sheer terror. Arihara realizes with dawning horror that Nia actually intends to murder her own flesh and blood. Refusing to let that happen, he desperately summons Hakuro to intervene. The spirit wolf lunges, but Nia effortlessly leaps out of its path. She lands gracefully, admitting that his stubborn tenacity is starting to grow on her. But witnessing his sacrifice, Lifa finds a sudden, fierce resolve to fight back. She turns to Arihara, demanding that he grant her all of his magical power. With a defiant roar, she declares that she will be the one to take her sister down. Arihara can only stare in shock, stunned by her sudden, desperate gamble. But seeing the fire in her eyes, he decides to place his absolute trust in her. He manifests his pure magic into a swirling sphere of raw, golden energy. With a confident smile, he hurls the power toward her, telling her to take it all. And she accepts it in the most direct way possible, by devouring it whole. Arihara panics, realizing this was an insanely reckless and unplanned power-up. The sheer magnitude of the energy overwhelms her, sending her crashing down in agony. Nia simply watches with a smug grin, fascinated by this bizarre new development. Lifa screams as the power surges through her veins, triggering a violent transformation. But Arihara just smiles, insisting his faith in her is absolute. As Lifa's body trembles with pain, a sinister dark aura erupts around her. Her fingers contort, her nails sharpening into lethal, monstrous talons. A guttural, inhuman roar erupts from her lungs, shaking the entire clearing. She stands tall, her demonic blood finally surging. Talk about a final form moment. She recalls her past, reflecting on how she feared this power while her sister embraced it. Nia used that very same darkness to rise as a commander in the Demon Lord's army. But if her sister insists on using that strength to harm those she loves, then Lifa will finally unleash the beast she's kept locked away. With a primal scream, the hero reveals her true, untamed form. Lifa lunges forward, becoming a blur of raw, monstrous fury. She delivers a savage strike, her claws aimed directly at her sister's throat. Nia realizes Lifa used Arihara's magic to forcibly trigger this transformation. She manages to block the blow, dismissively calling it a mindless rampage. Nia arrogantly declares that her sister won't even be able to land a scratch. But Lifa's clawed hand suddenly grips her arm, shattering her composure. Nia is left paralyzed with shock, unable to believe she was actually caught. She realizes with mounting dread that Lifa is still conscious. Talk about a software upgrade. Lifa acknowledges the physical changes, her hair and tail now fully manifested. She declares that she's finally mastered her monster side without losing her soul. Arihara watches with a relieved smile, his reckless gamble finally paying off. But Nia's focus is quickly diverted as a new threat emerges from the shadows. Lifa moves like a phantom, her afterimages encircling her sister. She strikes with her obsidian claws, unleashing a blur of deadly dark energy. For the first time, Nia is genuinely caught off guard by the sudden assault. She manages to block, initially dismissing her sister's newfound speed. But Lifa emerges from another shadow, maintaining her relentless pressure. She admits she always worried about her long-lost sister, a classic I can fix her moment, just with more claws. Nia merely laughs it off, mocking her concern as a pathetic waste of time. Lifa declares that if Nia continues this path of destruction, she'll be forced to stop her. With a furious roar, Lifa fully unleashes the depths of her newfound power. She summons a storm of shadow spears that erupt violently from the earth. Yet Nia moves like a specter, effortlessly deflecting every single projectile. Even so, the commander's stoic expression finally cracks under the pressure. Lifa stays on her in an instant, refusing to let up on her relentless assault. The hero's monstrous strength clashes violently against her sister's blade. Lifa screams that she'll drag her sister back home, but Nia just scoffs at the threat. Lifa vows to protect Arahara at any cost, standing her ground. Nia just grins, thrilled to finally have a real challenge on her hands. Meanwhile, Arahara can only wonder how he became the prize in this twisted family feud. The final remnants of magical frost melt away from his sleeve. Arahara offers a weary smile, relieved his arm is finally free to rejoin the fight for Lifa. However, his body betrays him, collapsing under the weight of pure exhaustion. A warning cry rings out, his mana is depleted, and continuing now would be a death sentence. He grits his teeth, knowing Lifa's transformation is ticking toward its inevitable limit. Meanwhile, the two sisters remain locked in a ferocious, high-speed duel. Arahara forces himself to regain focus, desperately clawing back to his feet. Nia realizes her sister's new form is unstable, a classic power-up with a dangerously short lifespan. But Lifa roars in defiance, her rage burning brighter than ever. She launches a desperate final assault, conjuring waves of oppressive shadow. Nia counters immediately, retaliating with a blinding burst of light. Through the glare, Lifa's eyes burn with an untamed, primal fury. Nia meets that gaze, wearing a smirk of absolute confidence. The sisters collide once more, in a brutal whirlwind of strikes. Nia acknowledges her sister's growth, but insists it's still nowhere near enough. She follows through with a devastating, low-sweeping kick. The impact sends Lifa tumbling violently across the charred battlefield. She slams into the dirt, her body battered, bruised, and broken. Even so, she grits her teeth, refusing to bow to such a humiliating defeat. Nia looms over her, mocking her sister for ever thinking they were on the same level. Nia claims Arahara as her own, viewing his power as the ultimate key to their future. But Lifa roars from the dirt, screaming that he isn't some object to be used. Nia merely taunts her, questioning if it's really just his power she's after. With a blush, she admits she's actually fallen for Arahara herself. Talk about a messy family feud. This revelation leaves Lifa paralyzed with pure horror and disgust. Dragging herself upright, she refuses to even acknowledge Nia as her sister anymore. With a feral cry, she lunges forward, vowing to never let Arahara go. She drives her blade into the earth, triggering her signature shadow stomp. The desperate last-ditch maneuver catches Nia completely off guard. She's instantly frozen, pinned to the spot by her very own shadow. Lifa gasps for air, having poured every ounce of her remaining mana into the strike. Nia just scoffs, mocking the fact that it took everything Lifa had just to stall her. But when Lifa asks if this opening is enough, Nia's smug grin finally cracks. The heroine turns to Arahara, asking if he still has enough strength to finish this. Arahara forces his battered body up, admitting he's on his last legs, but he's ready. Nia watches in disbelief, stunned by the boy's unbreakable resolve. He bellows that he'll expend every drop of his magic for one final, all-or-nothing gambit. Skiff gives a firm, determined nod from its perch atop his hat. Even little Lime is ready to give everything for this final, desperate push. He unleashes Hakuro's true power, sending the wind spirit surging forward for the killing blow. He summons Skiff, who imbues the slime with a final, desperate fire enchantment. Merging those flames with Hakuro's gale, he creates a devastating, swirling vortex. With a thunderous roar, he launches the flaming slime like a living cannonball. Hakuro's spirit echoes the cry, lending every bit of its essence to the final strike. Nia watches in paralyzed shock as Lifa pins her down, sealing her fate. The commander howls in despair, realizing there's no escaping the incoming inferno. Arahara screams, channeling every remaining drop of mana into this singular shot. This is the ultimate fusion of his familiars, a beast of pure, untamed destruction. In an instant, the commander's smug arrogance shatters into a mask of pure terror. The impact is absolute, swallowing the entire battlefield in a massive, fiery eruption. The shockwave tears through the clearing, leaving nothing but scorched earth in its wake. As the smoke dissipates, Lifa admits that was a bit too close for comfort. She huffs, complaining that she was nearly caught in the blast herself. But Arahara just offers a cheeky smile, claiming he trusted her to handle it. His unwavering faith leaves the hero completely flustered and speechless. Hakuro's spirit form manifests once more, welcoming its master back from the edge. Arahara turns his gaze toward the crater where Nia once stood. The Demon Lord's commander lies broken and smoking, definitely one hell of a family reunion. He checks on Lifa, who confirms that her transformation has finally worn off. They both agree that Nia finally got exactly what she deserved. Shift suggests using Lime to bind the commander before she regains consciousness. Arihara nods, confirming he has just enough mana remaining to pull it off. The loyal slime elongates its body, transforming into a sturdy makeshift rope. With the strategy set, Shift cautiously approaches their fallen adversary. The shapeshifter creeps toward the smoldering crater where Nia lies defeated. The Demon Lord's commander is dead to the world, her long battle finally at an end. But instead of restraining her, someone decides to douse her with water, a brilliant move that definitely won't backfire. Arihara's eyes widen in absolute terror as he witnesses the catastrophic blunder. He screams for her to stay away, desperately pulling his familiars close. Nia simply chuckles, her power surging back as she stares down her drained captors. The commander admits she's genuinely surprised by this sudden turn of events. Lifa and the familiars are frozen, staring back in paralyzed disbelief. Arihara is struck by horror, realizing their ultimate gambit failed to finish the job. Nia offers a faint smile, conceding that their teamwork was actually enough to draw blood. Lifa shields Arihara, swearing she'll never let her sister lay a finger on him. Nia's gaze softens as she admits she'd love to keep playing this little game. However, she looks away, noting that continuing right now is simply out of the question. Suddenly, a massive explosion shakes the earth as a new player enters the fray. Talk about timing. It's the gold-ranked adventurer, Rick, finally making his presence known on the battlefield. He turns to his students with a relieved grin, checking to see if they've managed to survive. Rick stands before the commander, finally grasping the true nature of their foe. His gaze hardens, fueled by rage over her ruthless assault on his students. He unleashes his signature blade storm, demanding she prepare for her end. Nia looks on, impressed he managed to survive the monster horde without a scratch. She quickly realizes that in her current state, she's at a severe disadvantage. Rick presses the attack, mocking the idea that she could ever hope to escape. Nia's grin turns sinister as she forces him to choose, fight her or protect his students. He glances back at his battered pupils, his unwavering resolve finally flickering. The gold-ranked adventurer can do nothing but grit his teeth in pure frustration. With one last parting taunt, Nia vanishes, promising they'll meet again soon. The group stands amidst the wreckage, staring into the woods where she disappeared. Arihara clutches Skiff, admitting he never wants to cross paths with that monster again. Lifa's expression is a weary mask of exhaustion and grim determination. Rick sheathes his blade, certain that their paths will inevitably cross again. And so, the hero Lifa and her partner Arihara truly begin their journey. Returning to the city of Hendel, a fragile sense of peace finally resumes. They head back to the inn, their only sanctuary after such a brutal battle. They celebrate their survival with a massive feast, because nothing beats a mountain of carbs. Arihara digs in, letting the sweet taste of victory finally settle. But Lifa remains silent, the crushing weight of her family's conflict still haunting her. Arihara happily feeds Chiffon, praising the innkeeper's exceptional cooking. However, he notices Lifa sitting across from him, unusually silent. The heroine stares blankly at her plate, clearly lost in a somber trance. He asks what's wrong, curious as to why her legendary appetite has suddenly vanished. She finally looks up, her expression weighed down by a painful realization. Lifa tells him directly that he's free to dissolve their partnership whenever he wishes. Stunned by the sudden offer, Arihara asks why she'd even suggest such a thing. She reminds him of how he collapsed after that brutal showdown with her sister, a pretty valid reason to rethink your life choices, honestly. He was out cold for nearly the entire journey back to the city. Arihara flexes to show he's fully recovered, but Lifa remains fixated on the looming threats. She explains that as long as they stay together, Nia will never stop hunting him. For the sake of his own survival, she believes their paths must finally diverge. But Arihara sees right through her, asking if this is all just because she's worried about his safety. He meets her concerns with a calm, knowing smile. He admits that when he first arrived in this world, he was absolutely paralyzed with fear. His familiars lean in, sensing a shift in their master's resolve. He reflects on his pivotal decision to join the Adventurers Guild. It was his way of conquering that terror and carving out a place for himself, certainly a better plan than just sobbing in the woods. He vividly remembers the moment he chose to take the test and seize control of his fate. Now more than ever, he knows he must stay sharp and plan his next move carefully. He explains that during his peak moments of anxiety, he crossed paths with someone new. A girl who appeared even more lost and terrified than he had ever been. Comparing her to a stray puppy, he admits he simply couldn't walk away. What a smooth talker. Lifa gets flustered and tries to steer him back on track, but he only offers a gentle smile. He continues, noting that from the moment they first teamed up, every single day has been an absolute blast, which catches her completely off guard. He reminisces about their journey, slaying monsters and enduring the occasional injury. Yet through the struggle, they remained a team. Even the familiars seemed to beam with pride. Before he even realized it, the suffocating fear he once carried had entirely evaporated. With a self-assured grin, he declares that he has no intention of ever abandoning her. Lifa can only stare in silence, his heartfelt confession leaving her at a loss for words. She attempts to protest, but the words die in her throat. Looking down, she insists that staying by her side will only lead to disaster. Arihara simply beams, explaining that the solution is easy, they just need to grow stronger. He claims that with enough power, they can even topple Nia. His logic is simple, they just need to get good. The heroine is stunned, wondering if such a feat is even within their reach. He reminds her that their recent trials have already pushed their limits further than ever. Finally, she relents as his unshakable confidence begins to rub off on her. He then shifts the focus, recalling the plight of the spirit wolf. He vows to liberate Hakuro, refusing to let Nia reclaim the spirit's power. Lifa stands stunned, her eyes wide as she questions him about this mysterious new familiar. Arihara explains that while Hakuro stands before them, its true soul remains bound to Nia. He asks if she's genuinely ready to end their partnership, causing a flustered Lifa to immediately backtrack. Softening, she admits that their journey together has been the ultimate cure for her long-standing loneliness. Arihara flashes a gentle smile, officially declaring the discussion closed. The hero lowers her gaze, a profound wave of relief washing over her soul. Looking back up with a radiant grin, she wholeheartedly agrees with his decision. With the tension shattered, Arihara pulls a classic move and playfully swipes some food from her plate. Their celebration carries on into the night, their bond now forged stronger than ever before. Lifa watches him, overwhelmed with gratitude for having finally found such a reliable partner. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the breathtaking coastal kingdom of Filgan. A colossal fortress towers over the shoreline, a testament to the kingdom's absolute naval dominance. Within its walls, a massive arena plays host to a staggering display of magical prowess. A young woman stands at the center of the ring, effortlessly manipulating spheres of liquid. From the high balconies, a group of nobles watches the spectacle with visible apprehension. Even a nearby maid observes the scene, her expression a mask of chilling intensity. As her power surges, the water takes the shape of massive serpentine dragons, so this is the legendary summoned hero. Her eyes snap open, burning with an absolute and unwavering focus. With a sudden motion, she unleashes the devastating full force of her elemental magic. The strike completely obliterates a stone target in a thunderous explosion of water. The nobles can only stare in awe, forced to admit her power is more overwhelming than ever. Her target is completely vaporized, a terrifying testament to her raw destructive potential. Her maid remarks that she possesses the most formidable magical talent of any hero in history. But Shishihara only offers a heavy sigh, her expression remaining somber and withdrawn. Leaving the arena behind, she makes her way down a long corridor alongside her attendant. When the maid asks if she's upset, the hero simply retorts by asking if she looks the part. The attendant notes that the training session seemed to evoke a deep sense of melancholy. Shishihara denies it, but her hesitation betrays her, the classic "I'm fine" defense. She wonders aloud how her life could have possibly taken such a bizarre turn. The answer waits at the end of the hall, where a massive, intimidating crowd is gathered. It's a mob of imposters, every single one of them screaming that they're the real Arihara Kaito. Her attendant notes that dealing with these frauds has become an exhausting daily routine. She recalls how the kingdom officially announced her arrival as a hero from another world. They even plastered Arihara's name and face on posters across every corner of the land. The result was a flood of fakes, all blinded by the greed for a massive reward. She grits her teeth, hating the chaotic consequences of the kingdom's short-sightedness. Later, she collapses onto her bed, utterly drained. Turns out, a hero's work is never truly done. She questions if he's even in this world, thinking it might actually be better if he wasn't. Yet, despite the logic, a part of her still desperately yearns to see him again. A brief flashback reveals she had always watched him from afar in their previous life. She wonders how her life became so isolated and bizarre. Suddenly, a knock at the door breaks her melancholic trance. Her attendant enters, presenting a letter addressed specifically to the hero. Shishihara accepts the envelope, curious about who would reach out to her. Her eyes widen in disbelief as she catches sight of the signature at the bottom. She scans the page, finding intimate details that only the true Arihara could possibly know. A single tear of relief rolls down her cheek. It's actually him. Her voice trembling with hope, she asks her attendant if he's on his way. But the maid delivers a crushing blow. He's chosen to serve the hero of Handel instead. The rejection stings like a physical strike. Why choose another? It's the ultimate ghosting on a geopolitical scale. The attendants suggest they could force Arihara's return if she simply gives the word. The realization cuts deep. Does he simply not want to see her? She quickly brushes the idea aside, desperately masking her true emotions. Yet the news leaves her spiraling, a tempest of conflicting feelings brewing within. Her attendant asks if she's all right, but the hero can only manage a hollow reassurance. Her mind races as she tries to decipher her own heart. Is this relief or pure jealousy? The attendant watches helplessly, calling out to a hero who seems worlds away. She finally realizes that in this world, she's merely a title, not a human being. A cold, agonizing clarity finally begins to take hold. To herself, she admits she's far more fragile than she ever dared to believe. It dawns on her that he was the only person she truly had left in this world. But a new, agonizing realization begins to take root. He has carved out a place for himself, a life that no longer includes her. Meanwhile, she's remained stagnant, trapped within the bars of her gilded cage. She realizes she's been playing the victim, relying on everyone else to do the heavy lifting. With a sudden flash of resolve, she decides that her passive lifestyle ends today. She looks back at the letter, her solitary clue to his whereabouts. His writing confirms he's in Handel, living his life as an adventurer. Immediately, she asks her attendant for the location of the local guild. A plan forms. If she joins the guild, their paths might finally cross again. However, her attendant panics, insisting a public figure like her can't just join a guild. Shishihara dismisses the concern, explaining that a simple disguise will solve the problem. She raises a finger, commanding her attendant's undivided attention. She declares that from this moment on, she's to be addressed by her name, not her title. The maid stands frozen, completely stunned by this total abandonment of protocol. Shishihara then asks for the maid's name, wanting to be friends, a classic boss wants to be buddies moment. The poor girl's brain completely short-circuits at the unexpected request. Shishihara clutches her chest, wondering about the strange feelings stirring within her heart. Whether it's love or deep friendship, it's an emotion she can no longer ignore. All she knows for certain is that she must see him again, no matter the cost. She vows to keep moving forward just like him, her resolve now ironclad. Back in Handel, life finally returns to a sense of normalcy for Arihara and Lifa. More than a month passes as the duo continues their daily grind as adventurers. They're greeted at the guild by Lyra's signature, friendly smile. However, it turns out they've been summoned by the guildmaster for a mysterious reason. Arihara instantly suspects Lifa's antics, though she's less than thrilled with the accusation. From the rafters, Skiff confirms that Lifa is indeed a troublemaker, ever the supportive familiar. She swears she's innocent this time. Well, probably. The heavy doors to the guildmaster's office creak open, revealing what awaits. Belchai greets them warmly, having been anticipating their arrival. The guildmaster explains they have a high-profile visitor from the Filgan kingdom. A familiar voice calls his name, and Arihara turns to see a shocking face, Shishihara. Stunned, he can only stare in disbelief, stammering the name of his former classmate. She teases him for his reaction, proving that social awkwardness transcends even different worlds. He assures her it's fine, expressing his genuine relief that she's safe and sound. Despite the relief, the hero can only offer a sincere and heartfelt apology. He reflects on the summoning, knowing there was nothing she could have done to stop it. Suddenly, the sheer emotional weight of their reunion hits her, and she collapses. She looks up with a relieved smile, admitting she had been worried sick about him. Lifa watches the scene unfold, her expression a mix of confusion and something else entirely. The guildmaster formally introduces the champion of Filjan, Shishihara Chisato, and her attendant. He then presents Handel's own hero, Lifa Ergel, alongside her partner, Arihara Kaido. Belch explains that a summit between two heroes is usually a massive, royal spectacle. However, at Shishihara's personal request, this will be an informal exchange between fellow adventurers. Arahara is left reeling as she confirms she actually joined the Adventurers Guild back in her kingdom. He's completely baffled, asking why she would ever make such a drastic and impulsive choice. She softly admits that after reading his letter, she did it all just to see him again. From his spot on the floor, Shift sizes up the newcomer, identifying her as the second hero from Arahara's world. Shift suddenly speaks, startling Shishihara, and quickly clarifies that he's a shapeshifter, not a cat. The introductions are cut short when Lifa gets right in Shishihara's face with a piercing, intense stare. Shishihara offers a nervous smile, awkwardly asking if there's some kind of problem. Lifa merely grunts in response, extending her hand for a stiff, formal greeting. As the two heroes shake hands, a silent, competitive challenge passes between them. Lifa sizes her up, realizing this is the girl Arahara knew from his original world. Simultaneously, Shishihara realizes this is the hero Arahara has chosen to protect in this one. The two remain locked in a fierce staring contest, much to Arahara's growing confusion. He turns to the guildmaster, asking what this exchange is actually going to look like. Belch explains they'll be tackling quests as a team, a classic case of forced corporate team building. He hands Arahara their first joint mission, telling the group it's time to get started. The newly formed party huddles together to go over the details of their first official assignment. Their first joint mission takes them deep into a remote, jagged mountain range. They're immediately ambushed by a pair of massive, charging bull-like monsters. Leifa reacts instantly, her eyes narrowing with lethal focus. She unleashes her shadow weave, snaring both beasts in a single strike. Arahara lunges forward, activating Shift to bolster his physical strength. He grabs one monster by the horns, ready to turn this into a brawl. With a guttural roar, he channels every ounce of power into his next move, and executes a perfect German suplex on the massive beast, because why wouldn't he? But he isn't finished yet, calling out his next skill for the final blow. He summons a massive megaton hammer, crushing the monster and ending the fight. The remaining beasts charge in a desperate stampede of horns and fury. However, Shishihara steps up, signaling for the others to stand back. She conjures her magic, a violent vortex of water swirling around her. With a sharp cry, she launches a devastating, high-pressure water lance. The attack shreds through the monsters, ending the skirmish in the blink of an eye. Arahara is left speechless, while Leifa remains entirely unimpressed. When Shishihara asks for feedback, Arahara admits she's incredible, a total support mage power trip. She thanks him, but her attendant points out that Arahara's style isn't that of a typical tamer. Shift explains that for a master of pure magic, this brutal approach is the only way to fight. Shishihara's eyes widen as she remembers that pure magic was once reserved for grim sacrifices. Leifa gazes at Arahara, her expression shifting into deep thought. Suddenly, her eyes sharpen as she vows not to be outdone by Shishihara. A new rivalry has officially ignited. Arahara, however, is utterly clueless, having no idea why she's suddenly so intense. Her frustration reaches a breaking point, resulting in a classic, comical pout. She begins raining down a flurry of punches, catching both Arahara and Skiff completely off guard. As the hero chases him across the field, Shishihara and her attendant can only watch the chaotic spectacle in silence. The scene transitions to a majestic castle nestled deep within the Filgan kingdom. There, a young blonde fox girl is throwing a full-blown tantrum on the floor, stubbornly refusing her orders. Her outburst is cut short by a shoe to the face as an unseen figure bluntly tells her to pipe down. An elf woman looms over the sobbing girl, offering zero sympathy for her dramatic display. The elf cold-heartedly berates her subordinate for losing the monsters provided just a month prior. The fox girl desperately insists she fulfilled her duty by replenishing the ranks. Dismissing her excuses, the elf demands she recite the plan once more for her feeble brain to process. With a sharp, unforgiving gaze, she commands the girl to speak immediately. The fox girl outlines their strategy, a devastating pincer attack designed to crush the Hendel kingdom. Her specific role is to lead reinforcements and sever any potential aid from neighboring nations. Unimpressed, the elf remains stoic, while the fox girl accuses her of holding a petty grudge talk about a toxic workplace. The young subordinate wails in despair, vowing never to forget this blatant cruelty. The elf notes that once Hendel falls, the demon lord's army will secure a vital strategic foothold. Elsewhere, Nia reflects on her clash with the heroes, questioning who exactly is spearheading this new operation. The fox girl commander vents her frustration, admitting her deep-seated hatred for her elven superior. The elf fires back, claiming the feeling is entirely mutual, clearly, a peak healthy work environment. We then cut back to the familiar warmth of the inn within the city of Hendel. Arihara raises his glass high, proposing a toast to their successful joint operation. Both parties indulge in a massive, well-deserved feast to celebrate their hard-won victory. Arihara eventually asks Shishihara about her sudden change in appearance. She explains it's a vital precaution for a world-renowned hero trying to stay under the radar. She then catches his eye, clearly having a specific request on her mind. To his utter shock, Shishihara asks him to start calling her by her first name. She clarifies that it's the official name she used when registering at the guild. Arihara offers a warm smile and agrees, addressing her by her name for the first time. However, Lifa suddenly interjects, demanding he drop the stiff, formal honorifics. He begins to stammer, visibly flustered by the sudden shift toward informality. Shishihara simply beams, clearly thrilled to finally be on a first-name basis. But the wholesome moment is shattered when Arihara yelps in sudden, sharp pain. Lifa is seen pinching his side with lethal force, so much for a peaceful dinner. He demands to know what her problem is, but she simply looks away with a pout. Sensing the thick tension, Shishihara's attendant asks about the nature of their relationship. Lifa proudly declares that Arihara prepares all her meals, a truly bizarre way to mark her territory. Shishihara playfully asks if he's taming her, and Arihara finds himself unable to even deny it. Shishihara's attendant begins prying into the exact nature of her relationship with Arihara. Shishihara explains that her maid is actually a seasoned former adventurer from the royal castle. However, the woman bluntly admits she'd much rather be back at her old, dangerous job. She's essentially trapped in this domestic role until a permanent replacement can be found. Arihara can't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the clearly disgruntled bodyguard. Suddenly, Shishihara turns to Arihara, the weight of a serious request written on her face. She hesitates for a painful moment, struggling to find the right words to ask him. But Lifa cuts her off by slamming the table, loudly declaring that Arihara is her partner. This fierce, sudden declaration of ownership leaves Shishihara completely speechless. Arihara is left with no choice but to scold Lifa for her bizarre and territorial outburst. Their bickering is abruptly cut short by a booming laugh echoing from across the room. A massive, lion-like man raises his mug toward them, telling the group not to mind him. When Arihara asks how he knows their names, the man casually admits to eavesdropping. The innkeeper rushes to apologize for the noise, but the stranger simply waves him off. He explains he's currently prepping for a massive job and didn't expect to run into them. With a confident, predatory grin, the mountain of a man introduces himself as Deus. Stunned by his overwhelming presence, Arihara and Lifa can only offer a confused greeting. Meanwhile, high atop the city walls, the sentries spot something terrifying in the distance. A frantic knight bursts into the throne room, delivering a message of absolute desperation to the queen. A massive legion of monsters is marching toward the kingdom, and they're ready for total war. The knight confirms the grim reality. A massive legion of 10,000 monsters is closing in. The Queen of Hendel stands frozen, her face pale with sheer disbelief. Bianca Horrence, captain of the Royal Guard, demands an explanation for this massive intelligence failure. But the Queen already knows the terrifying truth. This is the Demon Lord's main force. The weight of the impossible news plunges the entire throne room into a deafening silence. Her minister, Urine, realizes this is no random skirmish, but a meticulously planned invasion. The Queen realizes they bypassed every checkpoint to rush the capital, straight up ignoring the side quests to speedrun the main story. Bianca scoffs, never imagining the enemy would be bold enough for such a brazen head-on assault. Hardening her resolve, the Queen commands her captain to rally the troops at the city gates immediately. Bianca salutes, vowing to show these invaders the true, devastating might of the Hendel kingdom. The Queen then turns to Urine, ordering him to dispatch urgent requests for aid to all neighboring nations. Without a moment's hesitation, the minister bows and rushes to execute the order. The Queen sinks back into her throne, the crushing reality of the invasion finally taking its toll. She's still reeling from the fact that the Demon Lord would launch such a direct and suicidal offensive. With their own hero still a total rookie, they'll need every mercenary available. Talk about a terrible time to be under construction. But just as despair starts to take hold, a sudden spark of realization flashes in her eyes. She recalls a crucial rumor. The legendary hero from Filgan is currently visiting the capital. Urine's eyes widen as he notices the sudden, sharp shift in his queen's demeanor. Meanwhile, back at the inn, the lion-like beastman Deus finishes his grand introduction with a smug grin. Arihara and the rest of the crew just stare back, completely baffled by this sudden, hairy interruption. Deus scoffs, noting how the world has grown soft and complacent since the last demon lord's defeat. The hulking man then produces a small, official-looking document. It's a simple travel permit, the very tool imposters use to slip past the kingdom's pathetic border security. Shishihara immediately grows defensive, demanding to know this stranger's true identity. Their tense confrontation is suddenly shattered by the piercing ring of an alarm bell. A crier's voice rings out, the demon lord's army is attacking, and all adventurers must head to the gates. Chaos erupts within the inn, as Lifa insists to Arihara that they need to move immediately. While the others agree, Arihara hesitates, his mind clouded by worry for their safety. However, Shishihara stands firm, reminding him that she's a fellow adventurer now. Stealing his resolve, Arihara realizes he can't stand by. They'll face this nightmare as one. But as the group rushes for the exit, Deus's voice booms out, freezing them in place. Without warning, he lunges forward, burying a brutal punch deep into Arihara's chest. Our protagonist can only wheeze, his lungs seizing up from the sheer force of the sneak attack. The impact sends him crashing through the inn's doors and onto the hard pavement outside. Lifa screams his name, her voice cracking with pure, unadulterated terror. The rest of the party stands paralyzed, reeling from the stranger's sudden, violent betrayal. Deus smirks, mockingly asking why they're running away when a demon lord commander is right here. Arihara's mind reels, another commander, hidden in plain sight this whole time. The heroes can only watch in horror as the impossible truth settles in. Deus's arm begins to warp and shift, revealing the monstrous form of a true demon. His arm transforms into a massive metallic revolver, the ultimate case of bringing a gun to a sword fight. Arihara stands frozen, his mind reeling as he tries to process the impossible weapon. Meanwhile, just outside the city walls, two colossal armies prepare for a bloody confrontation. The demon lord's ranks are a nightmare fuel of grotesque monsters and savage beasts. But the royal guard holds their ground, led by the indomitable Captain Bianca. As she rallies her troops, their collective battle cry thunders across the open field. Even Lyra finds herself swept up in the electric, high-stakes energy of the moment. From a distance, Deus observes the spectacle with a cold, cynical smirk. However, his expression falters as he senses something is fundamentally wrong. Strangely, the monster army remains motionless, as if waiting for a specific, unknown signal. Suddenly, a brilliant flare erupts in the sky, piercing through the darkness of the night. Gil reacts with immediate alarm, his eyes narrowing as he questions the sudden light. Within the enemy ranks, a mysterious cat-eared commander watches the scene unfold in silence. A wicked, predatory smile slowly spreads across his face. With the signal finally given, the entire monster horde surges forward in a frenzied charge. The Hendel soldiers brace for the collision, locking their shields in a desperate defense. Gil grits his teeth in frustration, realizing far too late that they've been played. Back in the city, Deus lowers the flare gun he just fired, the ultimate, "it was me all along," reveal. Shift demands an explanation, desperate to know what the commander has just done. Deus coldly explains that with Hendel's forces distracted at the gate, the castle is now completely defenseless. A cloaked figure weaves a forbidden incantation, manifesting a colossal magic circle across the heavens. Deus sneers, revealing this as the second phase of his grand plan for annihilation. Without warning, the earth trembles with violent force, catching everyone completely off guard. Structures disintegrate into dust as a seismic shockwave rips through the heart of the city. Terrified civilians flee for their lives, while their world literally crumbles around them. In an instant, a massive district is wiped off the map, reduced to a graveyard of jagged rubble. The party can only watch from above, paralyzed by a sense of pure, unadulterated horror. A jagged abyss has torn the city in two, isolating the castle and rendering the royal guard useless. They find themselves stranded at the edge of the void, their only path forward completely severed. Arihara stares blankly, his mind reeling as he struggles to grasp the sheer scale of the devastation. Deus boasts that this catastrophe was the result of a massive, coordinated ritual. The army was merely a distraction. This barrier ensures the castle is ripe for the taking. It's a classic divide-and-conquer tactic, just with a lot more collateral damage. Arihara realizes with a sinking heart that Rick and the others are now trapped on the opposite side. But Lifa isn't backing down, vowing to shatter the barrier through sheer force of will. She channels her power into a devastating shadow strike, aiming to pulverize the obstacle. However, her magic dissipates against the surface in a harmless flash, leaving the wall unscathed. She recoils in shock, unable to believe her strongest attack didn't even leave a scratch. Deus mocks her, explaining that the barrier is reinforced with ancient magic. Brute force is useless here. Shishihara is struck by the terrifying reality. They are the only ones left to stand against him. The commander merely grins, summoning a nightmare beast as he welcomes their final, desperate challenge. Shizuku demands to know why he's blocking their path, questioning if he considers them beneath his notice. Deus smirks, admitting he's heard all about them from his fellow commander, Naya. He gestures toward the chasm, asking why he'd even bother when conquering the castle would be child's play. Arihara is completely baffled, demanding an explanation for his cryptic words. The commander finally reveals his true motive. He's just here to kill time with a quick warm-up fight. The entire party is left reeling by his chillingly casual declaration of war. Deus admits the original plan was a bore, but this chance encounter is a lucky break for him. Arihara's face contorts with rage as she realizes their lives are nothing more than a game to him. Their attention is suddenly ripped back to the city as massive fires begin to erupt behind them. Deus's summoned monsters are already wreaking havoc, turning the streets into a total war zone. The city's adventurers desperately fight back, raining flaming arrows into the chaotic fray. But the nightmare isn't over. Deus reveals he has even more subordinates already lurking inside the city walls. Shizuku's attendant realizes, with sheer horror, exactly what the commander is holding. It's a teleportation scroll, the final piece of his twisted trap. The magic circle on the scroll begins to pulse with an ominous, blinding light. The entire party is caught in the spell, completely unable to escape the sudden ambush. Suddenly, a massive foot slams down, sending shockwaves through the very ground beneath them. A monstrous dragon lets out a deafening roar, summoned to bar their path, a classic boss encounter. Deus watches from a distance, satisfied that his work here is officially done. Arihara can only scream in terror as they find themselves face to face with the legendary beast. The party is paralyzed with fear, their screams echoing at the sight of the monstrosity. The dragon unleashes a bone-chilling roar, its eyes burning with pure, unadulterated malice. Shift shouts a frantic warning, sensing the catastrophic power about to be unleashed. But Shishihara stands her ground, ordering the others to take cover behind her. She conjures a colossal tidal wall, just as the dragon exhales a searing torrent of flames. The opposing elements collide, erupting into a violent explosion of steam and raw fury. From his vantage point, Deus watches with newfound curiosity. It seems the other hero isn't just for show. As the smoke clears, the party is left trembling, yet miraculously unscathed. Lifa barks orders for everyone to hold on, a desperate gambit taking shape in her mind. As the dragon's foot descends, she weaves her shadow magic to whisk them away from certain death. They crash land onto a nearby rooftop, frantically regrouping after their narrow brush with death. Arihara summons his familiars, bracing himself to take the fight directly to the beast. But the dragon is relentless, its next strike completely obliterating the roof beneath them. He lunges into the air, raining down a massive axe wreathed in crackling lightning. The blade connects, but the impact is met with nothing but unyielding, stone-cold resistance. Arihara's eyes widen in disbelief as he realizes the dragon's scales are practically impenetrable. The dragon's cold gaze stares back, utterly unimpressed, so much for a grand entrance. It counters with a single, devastating sweep of its colossal talons. The force of the blow sends Arihara tumbling helplessly across the crumbling rooftop. The two heroes can only cry out his name in sheer horror as they watch him fall. The two heroes can only stare in awe as the colossal beast completely blocks their path. Arihara staggers back to his feet, claiming he's relatively unscathed after the dragon's devastating blast. Suddenly, a thick, searing smoke erupts around him, catching the warrior completely off guard. Deus emerges from the haze, warning Arihara that their duel is far from over. Skiff wonders if this is the work of some feline monster, a bizarrely specific and totally incorrect guess. With a casual wave of his hand, the commander effortlessly bends the dark energy to his will. Hefting his massive weapon, he makes it clear that Arihara's real fight is with him. In the blink of an eye, he closes the gap with a predatory smirk plastered across his face. Arihara is left paralyzed, his eyes unable to track the commander's blinding, impossible speed. It's clear that Deus is itching for a brutal, old-fashioned contest of pure strength. He brings his blade down with bone-crushing force, but Arihara barely manages to parry the strike. Our protagonist is shaken, realizing the commander's raw power is in a league of its own. He screams for Skiff to push his body to the limit, refusing to let himself be overwhelmed. With a defiant roar, he digs his heels in and meets the commander's next strike head-on. Deus merely scoffs, mocking the boy for thinking he could ever hope to bridge the gap in their power. Even so, Arihara's resolve doesn't flicker for even a fraction of a second. He shouts that the commander's rampage ends here, a bold claim for someone who was just a human pinball. The commander lets out a roar of laughter, genuinely thrilled by the kid's unwavering, defiant spirit. Meanwhile, the other heroes are still struggling to survive the dragon's relentless fiery onslaught. Shishihara begins to panic, realizing Arihara is now trapped alone with a lethal demon lord commander. Lifa remains firm, insisting that Arihara is more than capable of handling himself. She offers a confident smile, her faith in her partner's strength absolute. Shishihara is left stunned, captivated by such unwavering trust. Turning her attention back to the dragon, Lifa decides they'll have to take it down alone. Shishihara casts her gaze downward, a hint of envy sparking at the sight of their unbreakable bond. Lifa commands the attendant to prioritize the evacuation while they hold the front line. She then produces a mysterious vial, immediately piquing Shishihara's curiosity. Lifa explains it's a special concoction infused with Arihara's magic, essentially a magical energy drink. Without a moment's hesitation, she downs the entire bottle in a single gulp. A surge of dark energy erupts, forcing her into a terrifying new transformation. Lifa unleashes a feral, inhuman roar as her monstrous power is fully realized. Shishihara stands frozen, completely awestruck by the hero's raw, overwhelming power. Lifa orders her to provide backup, declaring that the dragon is hers to handle. She lunges into the fray, becoming a whirlwind of claws and fury against the massive beast. Meanwhile, at the city gates, the royal guard is embroiled in a desperate struggle for survival. The mysterious cloaked mage returns, unleashing a devastating spell upon the front lines. Lyra tears through the monster ranks, her hammer swinging in a relentless blur of motion. Captain Bianca carves a path through the horde, proving herself to be a true one-woman army. Lyra grows concerned about the tremors, but knows they cannot afford to abandon their post. Watching from a rooftop, the cat-eared commander observes that their two main targets are missing. Lyra gazes up in disbelief as absolute chaos unfolds around her. A massive beast looms behind her, poised to deliver a fatal blow. Captain Bianca screams a desperate warning from the front lines. Lyra freezes, her eyes wide with pure, unadulterated terror. Suddenly, the monster is impaled by a torrential storm of familiar blades. Rick stands over the fresh corpse, looking entirely calm and collected. He scolds Lyra for losing focus mid-battle, classic tough love from a gold-ranked pro. She can only cry out his name, overcome with relief to see her mentor. Rick notes that these monsters are far more formidable than they anticipated. Sensing trouble back in the city, he orders the team to prepare for a rescue mission. Meanwhile, the city continues to burn, a grim testament to the commander's destructive power. Deus unleashes a tidal wave of black smoke, putting his full strength on display. But Arihara calls on Hakuro, determined to meet the commander's magic head-on. The two opposing forces collide in a massive, earth-shattering explosion. However, Arihara's attention is quickly drawn to the civilians trapped in the inferno. He screams at the commander, demanding to know if he understands the weight of his atrocities. Deus merely scoffs, claiming the demon lord's army needs no justification for war. This casual cruelty leaves Arihara trembling with wordless fury. The commander taunts him, noting he doesn't have the luxury of worrying about others. Because right now, Arihara is about to face a commander in a fight for his life. Lifa warns Shishihara that her partner is still far too green for a fight of this magnitude. The other hero can only watch in awe, her own magic feeling utterly insignificant by comparison. Meanwhile, her attendant prioritizes the lives of the civilians, rushing to get them to safety. The dragon unleashes another hellish torrent of fire, a beast that would push even gold-ranked adventurers to their limits. High on the rooftop, Deus scoffs, wondering what on earth Arihara could possibly be smiling about. But Arihara's grin only widens, telling the commander he hasn't got a clue. He knows that ever since their clash with Naya, they've evolved into something much more formidable. Having a clear objective has pushed them to new heights, even if the dragon's scales are hard as diamonds. But Lifa has a simple solution. If one strike doesn't work, she'll just hit it 100 times more. Under her relentless, high-speed assault, the dragon's supposedly impenetrable armor finally begins to shatter. The beast roars in pure agony as Lifa's claws finally tear through its hide. Shishihara shouts her praise, thanking Lifa for creating the perfect opening. Arihara reminds Deus that while he may be a rookie adventurer, he's certainly not fighting this battle alone. Shishihara wipes the sweat from her brow, her focus sharpening to a razor's edge. She channels her mana, preparing to strike the exact weak point Lifa exposed. With a piercing cry, she hurls a devastating aqua spear straight into the dragon's raw flesh. Her attendant watches in awe, witnessing the true power of the most gifted hero in history. Deus is left speechless, finally recognizing the legendary hero of Filgen standing before him. Arihara just beams with pride, explaining that she's his friend, and that's all the reason he needs. The commander grits his teeth in frustration, realizing this battle has just become a total nightmare. Skiff taunts the commander, asking if he regrets underestimating their power. But Deus realizes this is far from an ordinary summoned beast. The dragon's wounds begin to glow, its massive frame wreathed in intense flames. It reveals its true, terrifying form, the legendary furnace dragon. While Lifa panics, she desperately tries to extinguish the growing inferno. She unleashes a high-pressure torrent of water at the fiery beast. However, the water instantly sizzles and evaporates against its white-hot scales. Lifa watches in horror as her spell vanishes, so much for a type advantage. The dragon lets out a deafening roar, its rage threatening to incinerate the entire city. Yet Deus simply smirks, snapping his fingers as if signaling the end of the show. Suddenly, Arihara's focus is shattered by a new threat emerging from the smoke. Before he can even react, he's ensnared by a pair of grappling ropes. His familiars are violently ripped from his grasp and sent hurtling through the air. He looks up in absolute shock, realizing he's been completely outmaneuvered. Two of Deus's subordinates appear, holding Skiff and Lime captive. Talk about a dirty play. A new commander steps forward, mocking that a tamer is worthless without his pets. Arihara can only glare back, his eyes burning with a murderous intensity. From their cage, Skiff and Lime vow to bring a world of pain upon their captors. But the wolf-like man just laughs, dismissing their threats as empty bravado. The commander explains they are former bandits, far more ruthless than the battle-crazy Nia. Arihara realizes his only remaining trump card is the spirit wolf, Hakuro. However, its wind magic is effortlessly neutralized by the commander's dark smoke. Pivoting instantly, Arihara changes tactics and orders the spirit to target the subordinates instead. This sudden shift in focus catches Deus completely off guard. Arihara bolts past, using the chaos as a distraction to rescue his captured allies. The two bandits can only stare in horror as the spirit wolf lunges toward them. A violent gale erupts, tearing through the very rooftop where they stood. Glancing back, Arihara admits that was far too close for comfort. Yet Deus merely smiles, impressed by the boy's remarkably calm decision-making. He orders his men to stand down, declaring that Arihara has officially run out of chances. Arihara screams for him to wait, desperately trying to rejoin the fray. But he's already pinned to the dirt, as Deus mockingly tells him to take a nap. A vicious kick connects, knocking him out cold, so much for that defiant spirit. All around them, the city of Hendel remains engulfed in a sea of flames. Elsewhere, Lifa unleashes her own desperate gambit, the Shadow Spear. However, the dark projectiles shatter uselessly against the dragon's incinerating hide. The two heroes quickly realize they've hit a complete stalemate. Trapped on the defensive, they can't find a single opening to wound the beast. Lifa desperately wishes for a deluge of water, anything to extinguish the inferno. That offhand comment sparks an idea in Shishihara, and a risky plan begins to take shape. The Infernus dragon gathers its remaining strength, preparing to unleash one final, cataclysmic strike. But Shishihara is one step ahead, manifesting a colossal sphere of water to intercept the beast. The monster is instantly ensnared, its raging flames snuffed out by the sudden, crushing deluge. Lifa adds her own strength to the mix, infusing the water with dark shadow magic to create a lethal combination. Suddenly, Lifa panics, realizing they're far too close to escape the inevitable blast radius. Shishihara confirms their predicament. Attempting to teleport now would only leave them caught in the epicenter. With no other options, they brace for impact behind a massive, reinforced water shield. The dragon lets out a deafening roar, lashing out with one last, desperate attempt to break free. Their combined magic finally erupts, resulting in a cataclysmic, city-shaking explosion. Meanwhile, Deus makes his getaway, dragging the unconscious Arihara away from the unfolding chaos. Deus glances back at the mushroom cloud, noting that the battle with the dragon has reached its end. He wears a sinister smirk, declaring that his own little scuffle has reached its conclusion as well. Back on the rooftop, Arihara lies motionless, completely incapacitated from the encounter. Our protagonist is out cold, his face battered and bloodied from the brutal, one-sided beatdown. His familiars are trapped in a magical cage, desperately calling his name as Deus, and his men loom over him. Schiff rages against the bars, consumed by fury at being captured so effortlessly. The subordinate keeps a firm grip on the cage, leaving the two familiars completely at their mercy. Miraculously, Arihara forces himself back to his feet, leaving even Deus impressed by his sheer resilience. Schiff and Lime can only watch in horror, their voices trembling with worry for their master. Arihara demands to know why he was chosen as a commander, and Deus offers a final, chilling explanation. He explains that the Demon Lord's army is nothing more than a collection of society's outcasts. For people like them, every action boils down to one thing: efficiency. As former bandits, joining the ranks was simply the fastest way to seize everything they desired. Arihara is stunned that they would cause such mindless destruction for such petty, selfish reasons. But Deus merely laughs, confirming that's the only justification he'll ever need. He lives for nothing but plunder and violence, viewing Arihara as a mere stepping stone. His subordinates roar in agreement, eager to finish the job and claim the spoils of war. Having heard rumors of the kingdom's beautiful queen, they prove to be a truly vile bunch. Deus grants them his blessing, giving them free rein to do exactly as they please. The men cheer wildly, ready to unleash their unbridled cruelty upon the city. Arihara's head hangs low as he wonders how they can find any of this amusing. He screams in a fit of fury, calling them nothing more than worthless scum. Deus tightens his grip, deciding it's finally time to bring this little game to an end. He towers over the defeated boy, preparing to deliver the decisive final blow. Suddenly, Arihara's eyes snap open as a terrifying realization dawns on him. The commander lunges forward, his fist transforming into a deadly blur of motion. His familiars can only watch in absolute horror, completely powerless to intervene. Meanwhile, the city continues to burn, a tragic casualty of the commander's twisted amusement. Lifa and Shishihara lie buried in the rubble, barely surviving the massive explosion. Lifa pushes herself up, desperately checking to see if the other hero is still alive. But the dragon isn't finished yet, already charging up its next devastating blast. Shishihara desperately needs more water, and a wild plan begins to take shape. She explains that her magic is exponentially more powerful when she has an existing source to manipulate. Lifa catches on instantly, her gaze locking onto a nearby industrial water pipe. With one explosive punch, she shatters the city's plumbing, a brutally direct solution to their problem. A massive geyser erupts from the ground, providing them with all the ammunition they could ever need. Shishihara realizes Lifa hasn't just broken a pipe, she's tapped directly into the city's groundwater. Lifa looks back, asking if this massive flood will finally be enough to secure the win. Shishihara calls her a total genius, but Lifa just responds with a smug, confident grunt. Fueled by this surge of power, Shishihara begins channeling her final, ultimate technique. She condenses the massive geyser into a swirling, high-pressure sphere of pure magical energy. She admits there's a legendary move she's always dreamed of attempting, but never had the means. However, with Lifa's raw strength backing her up, she believes they can actually pull it off. Lifa's eyes light up, clearly intrigued by the sheer scale of this desperate final play. Shishihara grins, thrilled to have such a capable ally along for the ride. With their spirits in perfect sync, the duo prepares to unleash their absolute trump card. The water begins to coalesce around them, manifesting into a colossal humanoid figure. A towering titan emerges from the flood, a massive warrior forged from pure, rushing water. Overjoyed, Shishihara proudly christens her creation the water giant, Hidegata. But Lifa is far from impressed with her naming skills. Apparently, that's a recurring issue. The commander's punch connects with brutal force, sending Arihara crashing into a nearby wall. Deus stares in total disbelief. By all accounts, the boy should be unconscious. Instead, Arahara is already back on his feet, his hands firmly gripping the commander's weapon. Skiff realizes that enhancement magic isn't even active, this is something else entirely. A brilliant golden aura erupts around Arahara, radiating a power Deus has never witnessed before. The boy's eyes burn with a cold fury as he vows to never forgive these monsters. With one final surge, the commander's weapon shatters into a dozen pieces. Guess that warranty just expired. Deus can only gape in silence, completely stunned by this impossible display of raw strength. His shock quickly curdles into pure rage as he lets out a roar and throws a desperate punch. He lunges forward, pouring every ounce of his power into one final, frantic strike. But Deus is left frozen, his mind failing to process the impossible speed of his opponent. Arahara uses the commander's head as a springboard, effortlessly vaulting over him. He follows up immediately with a bone-shattering punch to the back of the skull. The impact sends Deus crashing face-first into the hard rooftop. His subordinates can only scream in horror as they watch their invincible leader get dismantled. Deus struggles to his feet, his mind reeling as he questions how any of this is happening. Even Skiff is at a loss, admitting it has no idea what this power is. Talk about a bad time for the encyclopedia to be blank. Arahara stands ready, sensing a strange and overwhelming energy coursing through his veins. Meanwhile, the water giant faces off against the enraged infernus dragon in a clash of titans. The giant's fist, wreathed in dark shadows, connects with a devastating, earth-shaking blow. Shishihara warns Lifa that total synchronization is the only way to pilot this watery titan. Syncing their breathing, the two heroes channel their combined resolve into the construct. The water giant lunges, pinning the struggling dragon with a crushing, liquid grip. The beast roars in agony as its hellfire is smothered by the suffocating pressure. With a display of raw power, the giant heaves the massive dragon high into the air. Lifa shouts that they have him cornered, urging Shishihara to deliver the coup de grace. From within their liquid cockpit, they prepare for impact. It's a high-stakes, high-pressure mech battle. The giant's fist connects, unleashing a concentrated tidal wave directly into the dragon's skull. The impact sends the beast reeling, crashing through the city skyline like a broken toy. It collapses into the wreckage, its infernal reign finally snuffed out for good. Still linked within the heart of the mech, the duo prepares one last surge of power. With a thunderous roar, they pour every remaining drop of mana into a final strike. The giant's massive fist descends, a cataclysm of hydrokinetic energy that shatters the earth. Its mission complete, the towering avatar loses its form, collapsing into a massive surge. Both heroes are pushed to their absolute limits, their mana pools completely drained. Their grand creation dissolves, the magical construct returning to its natural state. A massive deluge sweeps through the ruined streets, washing away the heat of battle. Drained but triumphant, the pair rests in the rubble. They won, but the city's insurance is definitely going up. Before them lies the fallen infernus dragon, a silent monument to their hard-fought victory. Lifa turns to her new ally, admitting that this victory belonged to both of them. Shishihara offers a soft smile, asking if they've finally become friends. Without a moment's hesitation, Lifa agrees, vowing to always have her back. The two heroes shake hands, forging a powerful new bond from the ashes of their rivalry. However, their celebration is cut short as the city continues to burn around them. Back on the rooftop, Arahara towers over the defeated commander, his body radiating a golden aura. Deus stares in utter disbelief, questioning how he can wield such strength without a drop of magic. Schiff realizes Arahara is physically enhancing his own body, a feat it has never witnessed before. The shapeshifter explains that this is pure energy, manifested through sheer willpower alone. But there's a catch: this state is lethal to its master. It's a classic power-up with a deadly user agreement. Deus finally understands. This is the strength of a boy who has shattered his own limits. Arahara taunts the commander, asking if he can survive just a few more minutes of this onslaught. Deus simply grins, declaring that if Arahara can't finish the job now, the victory belongs to him. Schiff confirms the commander's gamble, maintaining this power is pure agony for Arahara. Every fiber of his being is screaming for him to stop and just collapse. But he grits his teeth, his iron resolve forcing him to push through the excruciating pain. He lunges forward, transforming into a golden blur of unadulterated fury. Another devastating blow connects, sending the commander reeling backward. To Arahara, this kingdom is the first place he's ever truly belonged, and that's a damn good reason to go plus ultra. We later cut to our protagonist, now unconscious and covered in heavy bandages. In the quiet aftermath, the people of Hendel begin the long process of rebuilding their shattered lives. We flash back to his humble beginnings, to the moment he first learned the secrets of familiars. Now he channels that experience into a devastating final kick aimed straight at the commander. In this split second, the faces of everyone he's met in this world flash before his eyes. He recalls every hand that helped him up and every mentor who guided his path. Fueled by their collective strength, he declares that it's finally his turn to be their shield. Deus can do nothing but reel back, utterly overwhelmed by this surge of impossible power. Arihara ignores the agonizing screams of his muscles, his resolve now absolute. The commander's arrogant pride shatters right alongside his jaw in a truly visceral beatdown. He howls in pure denial, refusing to accept that a mere tamer could ever best him. But Arihara stands tall, his radiant golden aura serving as a testament to his unbreakable will. Though his face is a mask of grime and blood, his eyes burn with a fierce, unyielding defiance. He tightens his fist, proudly declaring his identity as the world's ultimate brawler tamer. With a primal roar that echoes through the battlefield, he delivers one final, crushing blow. The impact sends the commander spiraling through the air like a broken ragdoll. Deus slams into the dirt, his body broken and his ego completely demolished. Arihara towers over the fallen tyrant as his golden aura slowly begins to flicker and fade. Watching from their cage, Schiff and Lime erupt in cheers, overjoyed by their master's hard-won victory. The remaining subordinates stand frozen, unable to process their leader's defeat. It looks like their dreams of conquest are over. Observing the carnage from a distant rooftop, the cat-eared commander immediately signals a full retreat. But as the cowards turn to flee, a mysterious new figure emerges to block their only path to safety. Lifa and Shishihara confront the remaining subordinates, demanding the immediate release of the familiars. A chorus of pain screams echoes through the night, signaling their swift and decisive defeat. With the bandits finally neutralized, Skiff and Lime are liberated from their capture. Lifa turns her gaze toward Arihara, who stands like a silent sentinel over the fallen commander. However, his battered body is pushed to the limit, swaying precariously on the brink of collapse. As he finally loses consciousness, the two heroes can only scream his name in desperation. Outside the city walls, the invasion has been crushed, sending the monster army into a frantic retreat. Standing among the victors, Rick and Lyra realize that against all odds, they've won the day. Rick smiles, certain that the kids within the city played a pivotal role in this miracle. Back inside, Lifa stares down at Arihara, her triumph completely overshadowed by fear for his life. And so, the invasion was thwarted by the bravery of two heroes and their loyal partners. Shishihara watches on, her expression a haunting mask of exhaustion and deep concern. She reaches out to touch Arihara's face, mourning the boy who broke his limits to save them all. Meanwhile, deep within a dark castle, a trembling subordinate grovels for forgiveness after their failure. An elven commander seethes, vowing that their next attempt won't end in such a pathetic disaster. She slams her fists down, cursing the muscle-brained idiot who ruined her grand design. What a supportive boss. A young fox girl commander chimes in, arrogantly claiming she should have led the charge from the start. However, a single terrifying glare from the elf is enough to kill any further conversation. She's informed that Deus was captured, but dismisses him as a fool with no secrets worth sharing. Still, she knows that when the demon lord hears of this failure, she's the one who will pay the price. The elf commander explains that the demon lord remains a complete enigma. She's never even met them, knowing only that their power defies all logic. Meanwhile, the fox girl commander just sighs, clearly bored by the lecture. Elsewhere, Nia licks her lips, stunned that another commander fell just a month after her own defeat. With a smirk, she admits she's itching for a rematch with Lifa and Arihara. Back in Hendel, the grueling and arduous process of reconstruction has finally begun. Mages and artisans join forces, utilizing their unique skills to accelerate the recovery. Two women stroll through the streets, marveling at how magic has revolutionized urban renewal. One turns to her friend, asking if she's truly at peace with the events of the previous day. The cat-eared woman offers nothing but a quiet, somber nod in response. The scene then shifts to the grand, imposing towers of Hendel Castle. Inside, Lifa and Shishihara deliver their report on the clash against the Demon Lord's forces. The Queen of Hendel expresses her gratitude, proclaiming that their bravery saved the entire kingdom. Lifa casually mentions how tough the fight was, leaving Shishihara horrified by her lack of etiquette. However, the queen just smiles, having personally granted them permission to drop the formalities. Shishihara can only manage a humble, flustered stammer in response to the royal favor. But then the queen's expression hardens as she reveals her true intentions. She plans to honor them in a massive public ceremony, catching both heroes completely off guard. She declares that their legend must spread across the globe, a classic PR move to boost morale. The tale of these two heroes and their partner is set to become a beacon of hope for all. Shishihara remains silent, her expression impossible to read. Suddenly, Lifa speaks up, daring to ask if they can decline the queen's generous proposal. The blunt question catches both Shishihara and the queen completely off guard. Lifa admits she doesn't feel strong enough yet to serve as a public symbol of hope. The queen ponders this as Shishihara agrees, reminding her they're simply humble adventurers. With a gracious smile, the queen accepts their choice and promises to handle things discreetly. She encourages them to keep training and grow stronger for the inevitable battles to come. Later, while strolling through the city, Shishihara questions Lifa about her true objective. She probes deeper, sensing there's more to it than just stopping Nia, classic best friend intuition. She begins teasing Lifa about her feelings for Arihara, which triggers an immediate, flustered denial. Lifa insists she isn't being flirty, claiming Arihara is more like a mother figure to her. Shishihara just smirks, playfully asking what would happen if she decided to get close to him herself. The mere suggestion sends Lifa into a total, sputtering panic. Shishihara realizes Lifa is drowning in jealousy, yet she's completely oblivious to it. Lifa can only stammer out that getting too close is strictly forbidden. She then offers to let Shishihara borrow Arihara as an attendant, a suspiciously generous proposal. Shishihara confirms that seeing him was the primary reason she traveled to Hendo in the first place. She worries about whether Arihara will actually consent, but Lifa insists he won't mind at all. However, she has one non-negotiable condition: absolutely no flirting. In response, Shishihara simply flashes a smug, knowing grin. The scene shifts back to the familiar, in a quiet sanctuary after the chaotic storm. Arihara slowly regains consciousness, every muscle in his body aching from the intense battle. As he sits up and recognizes his room, his familiars cry out his name in relief. He's glad to see them safe, but Skiff quickly reminds him that he was the one they were truly worried about. The shapeshifter scolds him, revealing he's been out for 3 whole days, the ultimate recovery nap. Stunned, Arihara immediately asks for an update on the battle's aftermath. Skiff explains that Deus has been captured, and the city is already beginning to rebuild. The spirit then asks if he realizes he used pure magic to physically enhance his own body. Even Skiff is at a loss, admitting it doesn't fully understand how he pulled off such a feat. However, there is one thing it knows for certain, and Arihara leans in to listen. Skiff warns him that this newfound power is far too dangerous to use recklessly. Had his rage completely numbed the pain, his body would have literally torn itself apart. Arihara remains silent as the grim reality of his power-up begins to sink in. Skiff emphasizes that he must master his emotions if he wants to avoid a fatal repeat. Right on cue, the door to his room creaks open. Lifa and Shishihara rush in, their faces lighting up with pure relief to see him awake. He greets them with a smile, genuinely happy to see his companions are unharmed. However, he notices Lifa is keeping her back turned and asks her what's wrong. He points out that her face is bright red, but Shishihara's knowing grin suggests it's definitely not a fever. Lifa's mind completely short-circuits, her thoughts spiraling into a mess of flustered panic. Shishihara's attendant smiles, assuring them everything is fine while finding her reaction absolutely adorable. The focus shifts back to Arihara, who is genuinely relieved to see Shishihara doing so well. However, Shishihara insists that she was the one truly losing sleep over his safety. The crushing weight of the past few days finally catches up to her as a single tear escapes. She quickly apologizes for the emotional outburst, leaving Arihara scratching his head in confusion. Wiping her eyes, she confesses that her heart is simply overflowing with relief now that he's safe. Arihara and Lifa share a quiet, knowing glance as the tension begins to thaw. Lifa suddenly realizes she needs to spread the word that he's awake, the perfect excuse to dodge the heavy atmosphere. He asks who exactly she's referring to as he scans the familiar surroundings of the inn. It turns out all the key players from the recent carnage have gathered for a massive celebration. The heroes of Hendel raise their glasses high, kicking off a well-deserved feast for the survivors. Rick and Gil share a quiet moment, their mentor-student bond forged in fire and stronger than ever. Even Lyra joins in on the festivities, finding a rare moment of levity after such a brutal conflict. The guildmaster and the queen's minister, Urine, even make an appearance to join the victory party. Even the kind-hearted innkeepers who gave them a roof are here to share in the joy. Shishihara's attendant serves the food with her usual stoic grace. A bodyguard's work is never truly over. Arihara raises his glass, falling silent as Shishihara prepares to address the room. She explains that everyone gathered here came together for their sake, a testament to the powerful bonds they've forged. She confesses that since her arrival in this world, she's been haunted by constant anxiety and isolation. But reading his letter made her realize she was the one who had been locking herself away from the world. She confesses that she's truly grateful to have finally arrived here. Beaming with joy, she declares how lucky she feels to have met every one of them. Arihara reciprocates the sentiment, admitting he feels the exact same way. Even Lifer agrees, a rare, unguarded smile finally gracing her face. They all know that to protect their precious bonds, they'd risk it all over again. And so Arihara looks toward the future, vowing to reach new heights of strength tomorrow.